Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. My name is Liam, and I pick fights each and every week on this channel. And you may be asking yourself, Liam, what are we talking about today? The answer to that, of course, UFC Paris. It's going down tomorrow morning. It's an early start time for the UFC. So, yes, it's going down before, I think it's kicking off at noon Eastern time. Let's just double check so I make sure I don't give you guys some misinformation right off the rip. But I'm 99% sure that we're getting started at 12 Eastern. Yes, that's correct. So guys, we're starting soon enough, right? So I wanted to make sure I put something out tonight. That being said, it's a big undertaking this week. I write about mixed martial arts. I don't just talk about it. And so in order to write about 14 fights, that takes a lot of bandwidth. That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of due diligence. And so for me, I wanted to make sure I got my main card preview turned into Roto Grinders. I got my expert survey contribution taken care of. Now here we are. We're reporting to you live. I am going to go through these fights. I'm going to try and make sure that we're a little bit cognizant of the fact that it's late at night and people are trying to go to sleep. We're going to try and make sure that we breeze through these fights, but we talk about some betting angles. We talk about some of the things that we've learned over the course of our research throughout the week, and we'll see if we can find some good angles. So I appreciate everybody who's rocking with me live. We've got some heavy hitters in the chat already. Friend of the show, Big Bird, says, shout out to Greg Velasco. Absolutely. Contender Series vibes have been on fire lately. Hope you guys have been enjoying. We got a couple more great weeks left. So if you're not already, make sure that you get subscribed to the channel because we're talking Contender Series, UFC, all the good stuff on this channel each and every week. So also we got the Jewish Better, another friend of the show, Glenbot, a constant contributor, Stimmy OG, another one, D-Cot, happy to see him here. Tristan, first one in the building with the fire emojis. I appreciate everybody who's rocking with us. And I will not keep you waiting, guys. Without further ado, let's talk about the first fight of the night. And we're going to do what we've been doing a lot recently, which is integrating some of these information sources. So we're talking right, from the data points, right? So we're looking at the Tapology page, and what do we see? Number one, Balaji Oki, he's 9-1 as a professional compared to Chris Duncan, who's 11-2 as a professional. You've seen a little bit more experience on the Chris Duncan side overall in the UFC as well as a professional. Now, you look at the age. You've got a younger fighter in Balaji Oki. That's a favorable sign typically. Then you look at the fact that Balaji Oki is also going to have a slight reach advantage. So if anything, the anthropomorphic advantages are going to go with our guy Balaji Oki in this spot. Shout out to the University of Miami, who's advertising on half of the page at Tapology right now. But in any case, guys, what you're looking at here is a fun scrap. It's somewhat low level in this lightweight division, but I think here's the difference between these two guys. I think Chris Duncan is a little bit of a jack of all trades, a master of none. He's got power in his hands. He doesn't really have lights out wrestling, but he's a willing wrestler. He'll go out there and push it. He'll go out there and try and get as many takedowns as he needs to in order to win the fight. But he's very much struggling to take down the Omar Moraleses of the division, guys that are a little bit on the lower end, guys that are kickboxers in terms of their training and their pedigree. You look at some of these fights that he's won, he's gotten quite lucky in terms of, close decisions. They're going his way. He goes out there against, his last opponent, Manuel Torres, and we saw what happened to Manuel Torres when he stepped up in competition. Meanwhile, Chris Duncan, he had a very tough go at it, right? And you look at Chris Duncan, he ends up getting submitted in one of his losses. He ends up getting flatline knocked out by a pretty average fighter in Slava Borshev. And then you look at the fight that he won against Jan Al-Ashmouz. Jan Al-Ashmouz was pretty injured early on in that fight, and yet Chris Duncan wasn't able to put him away, right? A one-arm Jan Al-Ashmouz made it to the final bell with him. So when it comes down to it, I think that you have a guy who's got a lot of grit, a lot of heart, a lot of toughness in Chris Duncan, but I think he's been, fortunate at times in his results. He trains with the right people at American Top Team. He puts in the right amount of work. You know that he's a guy that's going to go out there and fight hard, but we've seen that he could be submitted. We've seen he could be hurt and rocked with strikes. I thought that Charlie Campbell was absolutely dummying him before he got knocked out in that fight. So again, Duncan's got some power, but I think the same thing can be said for Balaji Oki. Dylan Salvador is a guy who's a kickboxer, fought in Glory, and he went out there and smoked Dylan Salvador without much issue on the Contender Series. So he's gone out there against a striker, done well. Timothy Kawamba tried to mix it up with him, take the fight to a couple different phases. And you saw that Balaji Oki was able to D up a lot of those takedowns. This is going to be a more difficult test in terms of the strength and physicality. K-Dog asks, is it ATT? That is correct. Duncan is definitely trying to go out there and implement these takedowns in these more recent fights, but you see that his grappling is still just a work in progress by my estimation. Manuel Torres is a fine and clever grappler, but the way he was able to easily take his back with that Kimura trap, I didn't think was a great look. So for me, I'm looking at Balaji Oki as the guy who I think is going to win this fight. I don't feel compelled to go lay the minus 190 because I could see a world in which he gets out wrestled and out grappled. Let me go ahead and take a look at the prices here, and I'm going to share this tab. We're looking at fightodds.io and just taking a glance at the prices. The fight is minus 160 to end inside the distance. I think if the fight ends inside the distance, more often than not, that does favor a Balaji Oki win. However, we do know that Chris Duncan has some power in his hands as well. Not sure exactly what his submission equity would look like in this fight, but you are seeing some sharper books like a Bet Online holding a 900 when other books in the market like DraftKings are holding as high as 14 to 1. So that's something interesting. Shout out to my guy Big Bird in the chat, says Oki points ain't half bad. He gonna hit Duncan with that okie dokie, says my guy MMA line mover. If you're looking at the Oki by KO price, it's pretty awful at plus 110, but Oki by decision, like my guy Pierce mentioned, is actually plus 325. So yeah, I don't think that's a bad look either. We saw Oki last time go out there and not get the finish, but he was able to outwork his opponent Kawamba, and he could definitely go out there and outwork Duncan as well. Duncan has had a couple of these fights where he's attempted a lot of takedowns, but he hasn't necessarily blown you away in terms of significant strikes. We'll switch over to UFC stats for just a second. And if you look here, guys, Chris Duncan, last fight out, one significant strike landed. We'll give him a pass. The fight ended in round 1. He landed 85 against Yanal Ashmus, but again, that was a one-armed fighter, and he was able to get off on some free volume. That was the peak in his career by far. 53 significant strikes to 47 against Omar Morales. Super close fight, split decision, nip tuck, and he needed the 5 takedowns that he got there against a Venezuelan kickboxer in order to get the win. You look at the Charlie Campbell fight. I know it says 1 knockdown for Duncan, none for Campbell, and 16 to 15 on the strikes, but I could just tell you guys, if you were watching that fight live and you bet Duncan, you would have thought that you lost your bet. You know, he was literally like falling all over the place, going to a hand, coming back up to his feet. Then he threw a haymaker and he absolutely killed Charlie Campbell. Hats off to him, but it does feel like the kind of fight where, you know, I think that we saw the limitations of both guys, but we also saw that if they were to run that back, I think Charlie Campbell would be heavily favored to win it again. And then if you look at the other fight against Slava Borshev, he got dropped there. You know, despite recording 2 takedowns, he only landed 36 significant strikes in that fight. So he's been outlanded against Charlie Campbell, despite getting the win. He was outlanded against Slava Borshev, and he got knocked down there. He barely outlanded Omar Morales. He needed the strength of the 5 takedowns to win. So for me, unless he's going out there and getting the takedowns of Balaji Oki or knocking him out, I think Balaji Oki can go out there and probably outland him. You look at the last fight, Oki was only able to put up 60 significant strikes. However, they spent over, you know, just about 4 minutes in control time positions there. I think that Oki is going to have a little bit more time to work at distance in this fight if he's able to D up those takedowns. So for me, it's just not a fight where I feel supreme confidence, but I think on athleticism, on upside in terms of who can go out there and be more violent early, I kind of like the Balaji Oki side, but I don't think that the price is worth getting invested here personally. We can move along to the next fight, guys. We got Nora Corolle taking on Jacqueline Cavalcanti, and I will once again share the topology. So here we go. We've got Nora Corolle, the Wonder, at plus 175, and this is a rematch, guys. Jacqueline Cavalcanti actually beat her back in the day, so if you go look at her record, she beat Nora Corolle in her second ever professional fight back in 2021 via decision. That was Nora Cornolle's professional debut. So now both women are running it back in the UFC. What have we seen from Nora Corolle at this point in her career? We've seen that she has power for WMMA. We've seen that she is not a great takedown defender, but she's willing to work back up. She's not going to quit instantly when the fight hits the ground. She's got some willingness to resist. She's got a strong will to win. And I think that you look at the Cavalcanti side, and she's the cleaner, smoother operator, you know, by a little bit. But Corolle is just a violent, aggressive woman on the feet. I think she is capable of landing heavy shots, of doing damage. I think that you look at Josiane Nunes, and Josiane Nunes, for me, has a really putrid ground game. with no disrespect. She has a blue belt, I believe, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we're of the same ilk, so I wish her nothing but love and respect in her martial arts journey. But just for a UFC fighter, that's all I mean. She's below the standard. And so I thought that there was clear paths to victory there. I thought Cavalcanti maybe made that fight a little more difficult than she needed to, but she is a natural striker. She's happy to go out there and do that. And so that's probably why she's willing to step up to this challenge on short notice, right? This is a spot where you have a Cavalcanti who is, already got the win under her belt. So she feels like, hey, I could go out there and do something again, for a bigger price, right? For a bigger paycheck in front of more eyeballs. I know I could beat this girl. And additionally, there's a lot of women that are going to go out there and try and implement a wrestling and grappling heavy game plan, I would think, in order to try and get one over on Cavalcanti. And Nora Corolle is probably not going to do that, right? She's probably going to want to engage in a stand-up fight in front of the French fans. I think the one note that I have to give is that Nora Corolle was going in her last fight against a Melissa Mullins, who you may, be high on her or not, right? You may think she's a fraud or not, but she had real credentials in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I believe IBJJF World Championships at the brown belt level. And Nora Corolle was able to get back up to her feet when she got taken down in that fight. She was able to stay safe. She never really let her opponent open up, and she took advantage of her time on the feet. I thought Mullins kind of phoned it in there. I don't think you're going to see that from Cavalcanti here, but what I do think is, at her best, maybe Corolle could land a couple impactful shots, get the crowd on her side, and get another one of these close robbery-type split decisions. If you go back, Nora Corolle, guys, I remember at the time, everybody was having sour grapes. She won a unanimous decision over Jocelyn Edwards, a much more experienced fighter. 13-4 was Jocelyn Edwards at the time. And you see that Nora Corolle got the unanimous decision. Where was that fight at, guys? Do I have to remind you? Paris, right? Paris. And everybody was up in arms about the decision at the time. But in this case, both of these women are local market fighters. But I do think the one that's going to have, that French crowd eating out of their hand a little bit more is Nora Corolle. And the other thing to say is Cavalcanti at times gets lulled into these fights where she's moving backwards, she's retreating, she's looking to counter and attack as she retreats. And if you back up constantly against a home market fighter while they're throwing heavies, even if they're not landing, even if they're touching your gloves, it does leave that opening for a little bit of robbery equity, for a little bit of, potentially a difficult decision. And I wanted to just show you guys, if I forgot to mention before, this is the face-off between Chris Duncan and Balaji Oki. They're clearly very similar in size. Go ahead and take a look at the face-off between Corolle and Cavalcanti. Both these women, look a very similar size. I would say, if anything, Cavalcanti is slightly larger in this spot. However, you see the confidence, the big smile brewing on the face of Nora Corolle. When you talk about motivation, oftentimes these rematches, one person's been sitting up all night thinking, like, how did this person beat me? What could I do different? How could I go out there and get a different result? And the other person is thinking to themselves one of two things, which is, I should say they could be thinking any number of different things, but two things that they could be thinking that are problematic are as follows. Number one, I already smoked this person. This is going to be an easy fight. And then if the fight is just harder than they expected, it could be something that overwhelms them. It could be something that breaks them. They could have a, underperformance. The other thing is, I could tell you this from my personal experience, guys. When I was young, when I was wrestling, I did not like to go against the same person twice. And the reason being was I would get self-doubt. I would say things to myself. And I used this program called Wrestling Mindset when I was younger to overcome some sports psychology flaws that I had. And I would consistently, when I was going into rematches, especially if I had already won the first time, I would think to myself, what if I lose? What will people think? Because I already beat this guy once. I know I could beat him. So now if I lose, it's just on me. It's my failure. It's all my fault. And that makes more pressure. And sometimes pressure makes diamonds. Other times pressure makes coal. So we just got to be cognizant of the fact that Cavalcanti has a lot of reasons to believe in herself in this fight, but she also has some reasons to maybe be overconfident, or she has some reasons to maybe say to herself, like, how could I impress more? Last time it was a unanimous decision. Do I have to go out there and finish her? Does she change something about her approach in order to, have a certain style of fight or try and achieve a better performance? These are the small little things that I try and think about from a motivation standpoint. I think that when it comes down to it, The right woman's favored, but the number is probably a little bit off here. I think that Corolle is a solid fighter, but she did lose the first time out. She is the older woman. You have to question how much room there is necessarily for improvement. And we'll go back to sharing the Tapology page for a second. 3-inch reach advantage as well as a 1-inch height advantage for the younger Jacqueline Cavalcanti. So I think I understand why Cavalcanti is favored here. But the one thing I will note is some people said, why do you think Cavalcanti is a smaller favorite than Melissa Mullins? And it's all about styles. The style that Mullins was supposed to bring, right? Pre-fight is a different thing than post-fight. Pre-fight, the style she's supposed to bring is grappling heavy, get takedowns on Corolle. We saw Corolle taken down by a blue belt in Edwards. So the idea was, could you take her to the ground and expose her? And what happened was Mullins took her to the ground, couldn't expose her, and got exposed herself. And so now, do we expect Cavalcanti to go out there and put her on the ground? Probably not. So what Cavalcanti is probably going to do is the same thing she normally does, which is go out there and implement mostly her striking. And if she's going to go out there and strike with a striker for the full 15 minutes, it's probably just going to play out a little bit closer for WMMA standards. A lot of times we don't see these finishes, produce. And so if there's not a finish and it comes to a close scorecard for a local market fighter in their hometown, it's the kind of thing that you just want to be nervous about. I ain't putting my real name on YouTube, says Luana Santos just won and had a turnaround fight and lost. It will happen for Cavalcanti. It's very possible. I think that that's a great point. JB and Big Bird, did Barez address coming back from the fractured orbital from old coach and having to move gym to enter him in Mexico? What a banger fight, says Haunter. Anthony Phillips with the salute. Great point, says my man JB. JB's giving me a compliment, says I can beat Josiane Nunes. I appreciate you, brother. Jacqueline, most likely by decision. I think that makes sense as well in terms of the most likely outcome. Good luck tomorrow. Thank you very much. Hit the like. Make sure you do that. I really appreciate the support. It means the world, and it's a really easy way to show love and support. With that being said, guys, I will go ahead and just glance at the market for this fight just so we have a reference point here. And we'll share fightodds.io. You're looking at a -220 on BetOnline, +185 the comeback on Nora Corolle. You're looking at across the market. Best available on Cavalcanti is about a -200 or so on BetUS. And BetOnline is holding the market best price right now on Corolle at +185. So as women's fights go, fun fight, good scrap, and very interesting matchup. I think it more than likely is going to go the distance. Odds makers agree, -325, chalked out to the distance. Corolle by KO is at 5-1, basically across the market, which is pretty low. That does seem interesting to me. That's an interesting price. Typically, WMMA fights are a little bit higher to end via KO for either side, and particularly for the underdog. But I guess they're correlating a lot of her win equity with the knockout. Let's go ahead and see what Corolle by decision is. Corolle by decision is as high as +285. Yeah, so that's very interesting to me. They've got the most likely method, Corolle by decision, but they have her knockout not trailing far behind in probabilities. Fascinating stuff. All right, folks, back to Tapology and back to the next fight of the evening. So next up, we had a question about this one from somebody in the chat just before, and I appreciate you asking. I think it was my guy Glinbot. So Glinbot asked about Daniel Barez. And Daniel Barez, as far as I understand, has done some training on and off with Entrim Gym for a while. The thing about Barez is he also owned a gym, and this is all as best I understand it, right? But he's a guy that has real skills in all positions. If you go watch this guy fight, he has an ability to win fights with his hands, right? To go out there and knock people out. But he also has an ability to finish fights on the mat. And when I went back and watched his film, the thing that stood out to me about Daniel Barez is, number one, he's the only guy in 4 fights to knock down Jafel Filo. If you guys remember, Jafel Filo knocked down Roybert Echeverria, put him down bad, hit him very hard in that fight. Against Muhammad Makayev, there was a ton of grappling, a lot of situations, but who came closest to beating Makayev in the UFC? I think you would have to say either Jafel Filo or I guess Kopp and Perez had pretty close decisions. But for the most part, this guy Mikhaev had pretty dominant one-sided fights. And we saw, when he struggled, he would still find a way to come back and finish. This guy, Jafel Filo, had him in, dead to rights basically on a knee bar, and Mikhaev let himself get injured in order to find a way to get the win. So Jafel Filo, super legit black belt. I have no doubt about that in my mind. So I can give Barez a pass for getting submitted there on short notice. The age is a concern. The cardio is not great, right? If you look at his losses, 3 via submission, 3 via decision. But one thing I will point out to you guys is he lost back in 2016, via unanimous decision, but he has not been submitted since prior to that, right? And he got submitted here by Chris Mia and Manel Cap, right? He verbally submitted to Manel Cap back in the day. But Jafel Filo, again, there's literally no shame in getting submitted by that. And when you look at Daniel Barez and what he does in terms of skills, he's got the boxing, he's got the power, and his wrestling is not bad. You look at these two guys, they both fought Carlos Hernandez. Carlos Hernandez, solid UFC fighter, around a 500 fighter. And the only guy to ever stop him with strikes is my boy Tatsuro Taira. If you guys have watched this show for a while, you know that I love Tatsuro Taira. I respect his game, and I bet Taira by knockout against Hernandez. Part of the reason I did that was because I saw Daniel Barez hurt him so badly, right? Daniel Barez landed a huge shot and had this guy on Dream Street. And unfortunately, he went for like a step-in knee from too close, gave up his back, and then spent, greater than 3.5 minutes with this guy on his back because of a mistake he made. He gave up no takedowns. He scored 5 takedowns of his own. And you look at this fight and you say to yourself, okay, how can Daniel Barez win it? I think there's a number of different ways. Victor Altamirano has given up, I think it's 14 takedowns so far in 6 UFC fights. Not good. He's giving up a lot of takedowns. He gave up a ton to Tim Elliott, and he's giving up some time in control positions as well. You look at his fight with Hernandez, he got out-wrestled by Hernandez. 1 takedown for Victor, 2 takedowns for Hernandez. Meanwhile, you look at how, this guy on the other side did, Daniel Barez. Daniel Barez, 5 takedowns to 0 for Hernandez. So they both fought him around the same time. They both fought him in similar proximity, and Daniel Barez had the better wrestling. I would say he had the better impact in the striking. What you see from Altamirano is he throws a lot of, kicks, like flowing, awkward kicks, and sometimes he'll open up with the hands, but his only stoppage in the UFC is over 0-5, Daniel Lacerda, right? And in that fight, Daniel Lacerda knocked him down almost instantly, and then he had to rally, get back up, and start, winging back shots. And even in that fight, you saw several submission attempts from his opponent there, but Lacerda gasses instantly, and he basically just played a very simple guard game, looking for guard subs off his back without controlling posture. I think when you look at Daniel Barez, I could show you examples in the Hernandez fight. I took some screenshots of it. I'll try and post them on Twitter later, but there were several examples of him catching Hernandez in pretty dangerous situations. Now, like, for example, there was a time when Hernandez goes to duck in on a takedown attempt, and he just catches him in this ninja choke, comes across the shoulder, and almost was able to get the squeeze. When Hernandez started to freak out, he just let it go to create separation. But then you see later in the fight, he gets taken down, and he goes for a reverse triangle, had it cinched up. He got a little greedy, tried to lock up the arm as well, and ended up losing the whole position. But you see that this guy, Daniel Barez, is very crafty with his finishing ability, right? For a guy who's fighting in this division, 7 wins by knockout, 6 wins by submission. So when the fights go the distance, it's going to be close. It's going to be tough sledding. But I'll just tell you guys, if he doesn't slip and give his back to Carlos Hernandez, I think he wins that fight. I think he probably would have won the first and second rounds there. But in any case, in round 3, while he was starting to fatigue, right? I think that my perception of him was cardio is his biggest issue. While he was beginning to fatigue in a very high-paced fight, his blast doubles were still money. The thing is, Hernandez never runs out of gas. If you guys remember the Denis Bandar fight, he just kept going right till the final bell and got the finish over Bandar on pure cardio and pure aggression, just kept the scrambles going, kept moving. And in that fight, Daniel Barez would take him down and he'd hop back up, take him down, he'd hop back up. if Altamirano could do that, he becomes live to win the fight late. He becomes live to TKO him, I suppose, or just grind out a decision. But when I think about how this fight could play out, I see several paths to victory for Daniel Barez. Number one, I've seen Victor Altamirano get hurt and rocked, but he's very durable. He finds a way to keep getting back up. He finds a way to keep swinging, finds a way to keep going, probably because his cardio is good. So I think that Altamirano is a tough guy. He's a tough customer. He's willing to throw. He's always got a smile on his face. He's a very positive guy. I got nothing negative to say about him, except that I think he is there to be hit. I think his defense at times leaves a little bit to be desired. He becomes very predictable at times in his fights, going like face down, like he basically just dips forward into the pocket. And I mentioned Barez got taken down off of a knee. He's going to throw that same knee at the head that is dipped over of Altamirano if he continues to do that stuff. So when you look at both these guys, I've heard a lot about how Daniel Barez is an older fighter, but guys, 33 years of age, going on 34 for Victor Altamirano. This isn't a massive age gap. I do think that the age starts to matter more. Every year starts to matter more in this flyweight division, no doubt about it. But when you talk about the motivation, Daniel Barez is seeking his first UFC win at 35 years of age, and he's a talented guy. You look at his fights, he went nip-tuck with Carlos Hernandez. That's a serious fighter, right? He went on a huge win streak. He got all these finishes on the regional scene. Then he's tasked with fighting Jafel Filo. He goes out there and drops him instantly on short notice. He looked like, oh my God, I might have had it all figured out. And Jafel Filo gangstered up and found a way to finish him. But Jafel Filo literally needed to go dig deep. Look at the Ode Osborne fight. It was a completely different story. One-way traffic. Take him down. Thanks for playing. Owned him on the mat. You just didn't see that in that fight. So I think of this guy, Daniel Barez, as a capable grappler, a dangerous striker, especially in the early going, and a guy that might have a path to a top-time decision as well. If Altamirano is giving up, like I said, 14 takedowns in 6 UFC fights, this guy, Daniel Barez, out-wrestled a guy who out-wrestled him. I'm not trying to do MMA math. I'm just saying, like, why is everybody so certain that Altamirano is going to run away with this? I get it from an ABC say always bet on cardio standpoint. If you want to take the Altamirano late props, I get it. If you took Altamirano at plus money, I get it. But to lay chalk with Altamirano, who I feel is a pretty basic fighter, his peak in terms of significant strikes was his first fight in the UFC. He went out there and took down his opponent a ton last time, still wasn't able to get the win. And again, maybe he deserved that win, but it was a super close fight. And is he going to be able to out-wrestle Daniel Barez like that? I don't see it personally, based on the two styles, but we'll have to find out. I think a lot of people like Altamirano this week, and I respect it. But for me, I rate Daniel Barez a little bit higher in terms of skill. I think he's a little bit more dangerous. And I think that except for cardio, I don't give a huge advantage to Altamirano anywhere in this fight. So that's the way I see it. I could be dead wrong. I tell you guys all the time, celebrate the wins, own the losses. I won't always get it right, but in this case, I think that this is a live underdog in Daniel Barez. Shout out to Norashi, asked, why isn't there a guest? I tried, my brother. I reached out to a couple of great guests that typically appear on the show. I put out a tweet a few hours ago seeking a guest. Hopefully tomorrow I'll go live once again before the fights kick off and, see what I can make happen. But I had to just get something to you guys. So I hope you understand it was the best I could do on short notice, but we did try to get a guest. Next up, folks, we'll talk about Ailin Perez. And actually, you know what? One thing I'll just mention is, I think the props are off on that Barez and Altamirano fight. I'll leave it at that. Y'all can look into the prop menu there, but you could use the analysis, read between the lines. You'll see what I'm interested in there. In any case, guys, the next fight, Ailin Perez is taking on Daria Zhelezniakova at 135 pounds. And you've got the 29-year-old Ailin Perez, the 28-year-old Daria Zhelezniakova. A little bit more experience for Ailin Perez, particularly at this UFC level. She is the smaller fighter here in terms of height. I would guess that's true in terms of reach as well. Let's pivot to our friends at UFC Stats and see if that is correct. So yeah, she's giving up 4 inches in height and 2 inches in reach here. I don't think that's a bad thing when this fight is on the ground, okay? I think that if she's able to get this fight to the ground, then Ailin Perez is going to be at a huge advantage. I think that when you look at Zhelezniakova, we've seen her have some awful tape on the mat. The aforementioned Melissa Mullins was able to get on top and ground and pound her to a stoppage finish from the mount. Was that a bit premature? Yeah, it was probably a slightly premature stoppage, but was it trending in the wrong direction? Was it a fight that definitely could have been stopped, like eligible for stoppage? Yeah, I think it was. And I also think that if it had went to the second round and she hadn't changed something drastic, it would have ended up back in the same position. So ultimately, I think Daria Zhelezniakova still has a lot of growth that she needs to do. I think she might have a higher long-term ceiling, but Aylin Perez is a dog on a bone. She really likes to go out there and fight. And look at this, guys. Montserrat Rendon, I had tweeted at the time, and I don't mean to be disrespectful ever to a fighter, but it looked like they were fighting underwater. That's just the reality of the situation. It looked like they were fighting like this. Slow motion, guy. It was crazy, right? And I think that fight tells me, if you're giving up 3 takedowns to Montserrat Rendon, you're in a lot of danger of giving up takedowns to Aylin Perez. Let's not, discredit her because of the OnlyFans and forget that she took down Stephanie Egger, a judo 80cc type girl once. She took down Ashley Evans Smith, a wrestler by trade, 10 times. She took down Lucy Pudilova twice, and she took down Jocelyn Edwards 6 times. So this girl, Aylin Perez, has been a takedown machine in her UFC run, and she's also been getting a lot of control time. You look at the Jocelyn Edwards fight. She racked up 4+ minutes of control time. You look at the Lucy Pudilova fight. She racked up 8+ minutes of control time. The Ashley Evans Smith fight, 11+ minutes of control time. This woman knows how to go out there and run up the tally, right? And what happens is she typically tires out a little bit over the course of 15 minutes, but most women are just not equipped to take her out of there when, she fatigues, right? Lucy Pudilova, I think, came the closest with a locked-in rear naked choke attempt in round 3, but she still lost the fight. Jocelyn Edwards, she wasn't able to have as much success with her submission attempts. Stephanie Egger was able to tap her. She's the only one to get the win over her so far in the UFC. So I think that Zhelezniakova is live in the sense that we saw Aylin Perez come in looking bad on the scale, right? She didn't look great. She looked like she was having a tough cut. She looked a little bit shaky. That death door on the scale seems strange when moments later you got Merab slapping your cheeks. Absolutely. I think that I definitely see your note there. For me, I look at Aylin Perez, and I just think she's got way more takedown upside. And in WMMA, takedown upside is like the number one thing I'm capping into a fight where, I don't think either one of these women is a lights out striker. I think that from a statistical standpoint, you would probably want to be on the Zhelezniakova side as a little bit heavier handed, a little bit, maybe a touch better cardio, but she just has really poor optics from her back on the tape. So for me, against a girl who I've seen go out there and secure, almost 20 takedowns, I think it is at the UFC level. What is that? 19 takedowns for Aylin Perez in 4 UFC fights. I mean, that's just absurd and pretty abnormal for WMMA. So until she doesn't get the takedowns, I almost feel like Aylin Perez is the side in a lot of these fights because most WMMA girls can't wrestle so good. She did the okie dokie. She qualified for IV rehydration by weigh-in optics. Wise wisdom in that. Merab the GOAT. Yeah, she got the Merab stamp of approval in more ways than one. City Travel says Altamirano gives his opponents problems with the awkward movement. Fair play. I think that's a good point. Glenbot says if Victor's kicking game gets going, he might be able to swell up that eye in round 2 and 3. That's a good note. Sprinkled Victor KO2, KO3, and main play on the under 2.5 at plus 220. Interesting. Okay. I see where you're going with that. I think that there's some good logic to that. So shout out to all you guys. We'll take one quick look at the prices on this fight and see if anything jumps off the page at us. So for the last fight, guys, minus 130 Altamirano, plus 110 for Daniel Barez. For this fight, you're looking at a minus 193 on Aylin Perez, plus 167 on Zhelezniakova. That's via Bet Online. Best price on Zhelezniakova in the market right now appears to be FanDuel at about plus 180. And obviously, these are just the numbers according to fightodds.io. Do your own research. There's plenty of different odds boards that you could take a look at if you are looking for more clarity. But that is what we've got on this fight. We'll take a quick look at the odds on the props. Fight not to go the distance, just plus 185 here for a WMMA fight. That seems pretty strong. Perez ITD is at plus 325. Zhelezniakova ITD plus 400. Zhelezniakova by KO and Perez by KO are both sitting about plus 500. Perez by sub has taken some money. Open plus 1,200, bumped to plus 1,600, now back at 12. Okay, fascinating movement on the props. I'll have to do more digging off the air and see if there's anything worth getting involved with there. But fun fight between those two women, and it did seem like we've got some heat at the face-off. We'll go ahead and show you guys the face-off. I know this is the one that y'all are waiting eagerly to see. So we'll go through the face-offs we've missed so far. Here's our guy Daniel Barez and Victor Altamirano. Pretty similar size there. A stoic look from Daniel Barez and a much more smiley Victor Altamirano. Zhelezniakova and Ailin Perez. No lack of intensity, no lack of attitude. These two women are both very confident. The only person to miss weight on this fight card, though, we should mention, Ailin Perez, guys, missed weight by half a pound. She got dunked on by Tracy Cortez because she tried to dunk on Tracy last time. So I think that this is a compelling fight, a fascinating fight. And for me, if my theory of the fight is correct, which is that Ailin Perez should be able to get takedowns here, then her finish props probably do have some value. If she's unable to secure takedowns, then the finish props on her opponent could have some value because her striking defense is not great and her cardio is not great. So those are a couple of things to think about here, guys. All right, next up, we've got a fight that I'm going to talk for a very short time about. This is Taylor Lapilus taking on Vince Morales, and I had to do a write-up for my friends at Roto Grinders about the fantasy side of the game, right? And when you're talking about daily fantasy, one thing that you're looking for is finish equity, grappling upside. These are a couple of the things that typically are high scoring, right? And you guys know there's some variation in between guys that are really high volume strikers and things like that. But for the most part, these are some of the things you're looking at, right? People with finish equity, people that create leverage, and people that have grappling upside. Taylor Lapilus is a lower volume counter striker. He likes to use a lot of evasive lateral footwork. A lot of the French fighters, you'll notice, have some of these similar tendencies, not all of them, but a lot of them. And they like to skirt the outside of the octagon. They like to pick away with kicks. They like to touch and go. And they don't really sit down on their offense. They don't commit 100% to their shots. For Vince Morales, he hasn't been stopped in a fight since Chris Gutierrez leg kick TKO'd him in the UFC back in 2020. And he's shown a lot of growth and improvement. He's shown a lot more serious skills, intentionality, preparation for his fights since going to the regional scene. And even his last couple of UFC fights, he lost to high-level guys, but he didn't get finished. He went out there and fought 15 minutes. And in this fight, Vince Morales, he's going to look to go out there and spring the upset. He's going to look to go out there and land his shots. But he tends to be pretty particular with the boxing, and he likes to mix in the grappling now. He's been getting a little bit more creative with these chokes, with these ability to go out there and use some pressure, grappling in order to try and make people fatigued, then sit back for your choke, this kind of deal. And there's a way that he could, try and catch Taylor Lapilus in transition. But if a Basharat brother can't submit Taylor Lapilus, then I'm saying to myself, Vince Morales is probably going to have a tough time submitting him. So is he going to clip him on the chin? Is he going to knock him out? It's going to be a tough ask. Is he going to quit on himself? Is he not going to go out there and give everything he has after just getting re-signed to the UFC? I don't really believe that either. So I think that it's probably going to be Taylor Lapilus winning a close decision here more often than not. So for me, that's the way I see this going down, right? You got a 20-4 Taylor Lapilus. He's got a ton of wins in the UFC. The one thing that's held him back in his career is that he's been boring, right? He had a good win-loss record his first stint in the UFC, and he was pretty boring, so he got cut. And in my opinion, Taylor Lapilus going out there and losing to Farid Basharat, for my money, is one of the top prospects in the division. His grappling is sensational. He knows how to strike as well. He can wrestle. He could do it for 15 minutes. So I think of Taylor Lapilus going out there and having a competitive, 29-28 type of decision with him as a positive sign. The Cody Stamann fight, he went out there and looked very good. The Callan Loughran fight, he looked solid as well. Gave up a couple of takedowns there. So that's the sign for Vince Morales. And hey, maybe I could get a takedown. Maybe I can mix something in. Maybe I can find something crazy. But if he doesn't find that special moment, I think that the crowd, I think that the style, it's all going to be an uphill battle for Vince. I think he's going to be, just down on the cards. Shout out to Glenbot, one of our sharp members of the chat. Appreciate you being here always, brother. Says JB Morales, sub 16-1, straight round 2, 20-1, and round 3, 25-1. Morales seems to have changed to a more grappling-based style. Yeah, he definitely has. I don't know that it's more effective grappling than what we see from the likes of Farid Basharat, but certainly his motivation's at an all-time high. His confidence is there. But we do want to just remember he's 3-5 in his UFC run. He fought a pretty tough quality of opposition, but Miles Johns, Jonathan Martinez, Chris Gutierrez, those are all pretty solid. Those are all fringe top 15 guys. Benito Lopez, Domingo Pilarte, those are really not losses that are aging super well. So I definitely understand. It's been a number of years. He's gotten a lot better. But Vince is a guy that he's been beating the guys he's supposed to beat on the regional scene, right? A Teruto Ishihara, a Hunter Azure. These are former UFC guys, but they're the kind of guys you need to beat to be in the UFC. And I do think that Vince deserves to be in the UFC, but Taylor Lapilus is probably just one tier above him at this stage of the game. Good scrap, though. Good scrap. And not one that I have particular betting interest in, guys. I think more often than not, it goes the distance. All right, next up, we've got an interesting one here. And I did make this my prop squad write-up for the Action Network, so I'm not sure if that's been published yet. So until I can try and get some confirmation whether or not that's been published, I'll keep what the exact prop is to myself. But again, I always say, you guys that listen close, you guys will have no problem ever figuring out the kind of things that I'm looking at from a prop standpoint. You just have to be close listeners, as I call it. But you look at this fight, guys, what we've got is Ludovic Mr. Highlight Klein taking on Roosevelt Roberts. And Roosevelt Roberts, he's not a bad fighter by any means, right? He's a solid enough guy. You look at his intangibles on paper. I mean, he's a similar age, right? 1 year older, negligible difference. He's way taller, 6'2" compared to 5'7". He's massive in height compared to Ludovic Klein. And he's also going to have a half-inch reach advantage. So he's the bigger fighter. He's not way older or something. But here's the differences, right? Number one, if Ludovic Klein was the underdog, right? He's a minus 1,000 favorite. But I'm saying if he was the underdog or if he was an even money type of price, he would fit a system for me, which is just a younger guy with more professional experience. He's had 27 professional bouts, and he's 29 years of age, right? Roosevelt Roberts has had 16 fights. He's 30 years of age. He's just not as active as a professional. And here's the other thing that we want to keep in the back of our mind. I like to think not just in terms of who you fought, but what are your quality wins, and not just in the UFC. If you've beaten UFC quality opponents outside the UFC, I'll give you credit for that too, right? So you look at the quality wins for Ludovic Klein. Thiago Moises, that's a quality win, man. Ignacio Bahamondes, that's a quality win. Jai Herbert, majority draw, that's a quality opponent, right? Mason Jones, that's a quality win. Devontae Smith split decision, that was fine. I'm pretty sure I cashed Ludovic Klein as a big dog there against no cardio Devontae Smith. That was a great one. The Nate Landwehr fight, he got submitted in the third round. Hats off to Nate. Nate's a dog. We know that. The Trezano fight. I remember at the time, people thought that was a robbery, straight up. I bet Trezano, and people thought that was a robbery. Klein took him down a couple times. I think Trezano might have outlanded him. It was a nip-tuck fight, and Ludovic Klein has fought a lot more aggressively, I would say, ever since then. And if you look at the fight before that against Shane Young, this guy came into the UFC and absolutely blasted Shane Young into the third dimension with that high kick. So his known skill set coming into the UFC, the guy was a devastating knockout artist. He also had 8 wins career to the submission, guys. And so far in his UFC run, he hasn't even attempted a submission. He's dominated a few guys on the ground. He's gotten plenty of takedowns. So it's not like he can't go out there and take these guys down. But so far, he hasn't had an opponent where he's really tried to leverage that submission skill set in the UFC. And I think you can understand why in large part. Shane Young, he KO'd him instantly. Mike Trezano is a pretty solid grappler. If we go back and look at Trezano's record, Trezano is 2-1 career to the submission. So he's just normally not mixing it up on the ground in his fights. Nate Landwehr, right, is a very solid submission grappler. If you look at his career to the submission, 2-1, but 2 of those wins, guys, were in the UFC. So at the UFC level, Nate the Train is going out there and submitting guys, especially when they get tired late. It's become his bread and butter late in his career. Mason Jones, I believe, is a BJJ and judo black belt, and he got owned in the wrestling and grappling by Ludovic Klein, if my memory serves, right? Then the Jai Herbert fight, I can't remember, but I believe Jai Herbert has some credentials in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. Ignacio Bahamondes, now he's the talk of the town off of a fresh knockout. Ludovic Klein wrestled him to the ground, kept him very disciplined in that fight, held on to him, did what he needed to do to get the win. AJ Cunningham, he absolutely smoked him, and that was a fight that shouldn't have been sanctioned probably. Thiago Moises, guys, a former BJJ world champion, a guy who was very high level, a guy who's a black belt, a guy who knows his way around the octagon, a guy who's had a ton of professional experience in his own right at the LFA, 5-round fights, all this stuff. And I just think that we've seen Ludovic Klein grow into a much more potent, developed prospect. But at minus 1,000, you're asking yourself, could anything go wrong? I mean, first and foremost, we've seen Ludovic Klein gas out before. His finish loss against Nate Landwehr was a direct result of him gassing out. His lack of volume in the lighter 2 rounds against Mike Trezano, I believe, is what came back to bite him in that fight. Thiago Moises, Ignacio Bahamondes, he was able to out-wrestle, out-grapple these guys, use his strength and his physicality. I think he could definitely do that to Roosevelt Roberts here, but he's just got to be weary of, Mike Trezano, big, long guy. Jai Herbert, big, long guy. Both of those guys, didn't lose, right? You saw one got a win over Roosevelt Roberts. The other one went to a draw. So is he going to have a hard time with somebody as lengthy, as awkward, as long, and as tall as Roosevelt Roberts? That's an open question. But here's the thing about Roberts that we've got to take into account, guys. He's been a mark to the submission, okay? 5-2 career to the sub. But this is what we got to remember. His last loss was against Mateusz Rebecki. He got armbarred in the first round. Not a great look. But Rebecki is a tough guy. He missed weight for that fight, and he still wasn't able to get the win. He was a big underdog. He lost a split decision to Austin Hubbard. I thought that could have went either way, but that doesn't really shine you in the greatest light, honestly. The Nate Jennerman KO, hats off to him. Dangerous enough guy. That's his upside here. He could definitely, put a punch on Ludovic Klein, try and take him out that way. I think Ludovic Klein was knocked out once regionally. You saw Roosevelt Roberts get knocked out by Ignacio Bahamondes. First ticket I ever cashed in the casino was Ignacio Bahamondes plus 115 on the money line against Roosevelt Roberts. I'll tell you guys, Roosevelt Roberts, look at all these fights, right? Win, lose, and draw. He's been favored in every fight he had in the UFC, guys, except for the fight with Mateusz Rebecki. So this guy, Roosevelt Roberts, has been the talk of the town. And I remember before the Kevin Kroom fight, Bisping is like, this guy, Roosevelt Roberts, texted me and said, like, this fight's going to be so easy. He's going to get it done like this, whatever. And what happens in that fight, guys? Kevin Kroom almost instantly puts him in a guillotine choke and gets the standing guillotine. That has been overturned to a no contest, right? If we're looking on Tapology, overturned to a no contest. Most people won't do the due diligence. Look at that. Subbed him in 30 seconds. Kevin Kroom subs you in 30 seconds. I mean, good Lord, that's just not a good look, right? He gets armbarred by Jim Miller in 2 minutes, 25 seconds. Again, that's not a horrible look. Jim Miller's great, but his wins, who are they against? Brock Weaver, no good. Alexander Yakovlev, no good. Lost to Vince Pichel, good fighter. Beat Thomas Gifford, not a very good fighter. Beat Daryl Horcher, not a guy who was long for the UFC. Beat Garrett Gross, a guy with an 11-7 journeyman record when he was on Contender Series. So, again, I don't mean any of this to be disparaging. It's just the way it is, right? And you look at Roosevelt Roberts, he was also submitted right here by Derek Slater. The Titans cage back in 2014. So from 2014, then he gets submitted by Jim Miller. He gets submitted by Kevin Kroom. He gets submitted by Mateusz Rebecki. This guy's just been a mark on the ground. He's had a really hard time there. And on the feet, he's 4-1 career to the knockout. He's not some devastating puncher. He knocked out Nate Jennerman and these guys. You know, he's got some decent power in the early going, but the longer the fight goes, the more dangerous it can get for him. So I think that he's definitely live to finish the fight, but he accepted it on short notice. I don't think he ever had the greatest cardio I've ever seen. So I don't know that he can necessarily leverage one of those points of disadvantage for Ludovic Klein in some of his fights, which is that Klein used to gas out a little bit. So now I think Klein has a chance to go out there and ice him early like he normally does. But some of the things that Klein likes to do, the left high kick and stuff like that, you know, when you look at those maneuvers, maybe he can't pull those off, but he still has power in his hands, and the takedowns, the double legs should be there, right? Like they should be there in this fight, I feel. So if we go ahead and just peek over at UFC stats, so let's go ahead and share this tab, guys. And when we peek at UFC stats here, Ludovic Klein and Roosevelt Roberts, we see that Roosevelt has a negative striking differential right here. And meanwhile, Klein has a positive striking differential. Klein's also more effective with the takedowns. He's got a 90% takedown defense rate compared to 52% for Roosevelt Roberts. But here's the difference. The submission average. Roosevelt Roberts attempts a lot of submissions. He wants to go out there and find this sub. And meanwhile, Ludovic Klein, he has more subs as a professional, but he just hasn't tried it so far in the UFC. What if this guy gets tired in front of him? You never know what happens, right? It opens up a lot of possibilities. So shout out to my guy, Billy Briz, in the chat. Absolute gangster, friend of the show. Says, what's up, Liam? Hope all is well. Thank you for the late night content. For the fight fans that can't sleep, absolutely, brother. The late night riders, the night owls, so to speak. I got a cup of Joe right here. I got to tell you guys, the fights that we've just been talking about, I still have to do write-ups for my friends at Roto Grinders and the good folks on Patreon for all those fights. So that is exactly what I'm doing as soon as I get off the air. Cheers to you guys. I'm drinking the coffee. I'm bringing the content to you guys, and I'm keeping going with the effort, the energy, the write-ups. That's all working its way out. So let's go ahead and pull this up. We're always trying to talk through this stuff live with the folks. So bear with me for just 1 second here as I struggle with technology, guys. But what we're pulling up for you is my full card preview. So you guys just have an idea of what goes into these write-ups for me. And I say this so often, but I want to say it again because we're going to say it every time we ever talk about these things on the show. I will get these things wrong all the time, guys. I will not be right every time. But what I will do is always try and put in effort and energy. If you look right now, these are just the main card fights, right? This is how much I've written about the main card fights on this UFC card. So maybe that's too much detail for some people, right? Like maybe some people, they're not interested in reading all that. But I really try and go detail for detail, analysis for analysis, try and make it some of the best in the world. Try and make sure that I don't leave, big important details off the page if I can avoid it. And I'm never going to be perfect. These are the goals, right? Your goal is always, the highest aspiration. That's what you want to get to. And if you fall short of that, then you're setting good, high goals. If you can achieve every goal, if you can crush every goal easy, then you're setting goals that are too attainable, right? Too within reach. And for me, I want to have the best available write-ups. I want to do the best job that I possibly can. And I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm always going to continue trying to improve. So for me, that's what I'm doing right as soon as we get off the air is writing up this fight, among others. But I did submit earlier today for Action Network, my prop squad pick. It is on that fight. So I encourage you guys to look forward to that. And if you can go ahead and support my friends at Action Combat, Action Network, this is not a paid plug or anything like that. It's a bunch of fun guys, sharp guys that I write that up with. Maybe some names that you know and love, like my guy Die Hard MMA, as well as some other guys that you should know, Psycho Ward, Dan Stupp, my editor, some really sharp guys, some really good-natured guys as well, some guys with fight experience, a lot of guys that I think would give you a valuable perspective. We talk about it's not just my opinion. Try and source as much good information as you can, right? And I do believe those are good sources of information. If you guys can tune into what they have to say, they're all great people. So shout out to the Prop Squad. I am honored to be a member, and I do have one pick up for them this week. Now, guys, we're back on the prelims. We've got Umar Sy taking on Da Woon Jung. this is for me a weird fight. And I will say this, Jung is a hard guy to handicap because there's been times in the UFC where he looked pretty talented, and there's been other times in the UFC where he's come up short. But I will say he's had much higher level experience than Umar Sy as a general rule. Umar Sy is 10-0 as a professional, guys. He beat Tukos, who is not very good in my view. He beat Ildemar Alcantara, who is long past his sell-by date. Let's go look at his age. He's 41 years of age right now. So, like I said, with all due respect, long past his sell-by date, Ildemar Alcantara. He beat a long past his sell-by date, Luis Henrique da Silva, who is 35 years of age, but he had already been cut from the UFC at that point. So, not like he's fighting the worst dregs you've ever seen. But let's look at his early run. Right? His early run is all 0-0, 0-0, 1-0, 0-0, 5-0, 2-0. He's fighting low-level guys. Then he fights a handful of UFC washout type guys, right? Older guys. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. But then you get to the top, and what do you see? See a lot of cancellation, Sy injury. Okay. Bellato injury. All right. That one's just bad luck. And then what about this one? Corolle withdrew. So then he fights Tukos on short notice, and he absolutely destroys him as a minus 455 favorite. If before he was on this losing streak, Jung was going to fight Tukos, what would he be? Minus 200? Minus 300 or something? I think he would probably be a substantial favorite. So now you look at a Jung, who's coming in as a massive underdog here, and let's take a look at who he's been fighting. Right? And see if it's commensurate, see if it's comparable. He's 4-3-1 in the UFC. So he's got a positive record right now as a UFC fighter. And his last fight was a year ago. He got submitted in the third round by Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg is a top prospect in the light heavyweight division. They tried to fast track him, guys. Do you remember who they just signed him to fight before? Jamal Hill, right? They tried to get him in there with Jamal Hill right away. So then you look at the Devin Clark fight. And Devin Clark, for all his faults, of which there are a ton, he's a pretty meat and potatoes guy. He's an American wrestler. He knows out there, goes out there, grabs a hold of people, tries to, press them, put him in a wrestling situation. If he can't do that, he didn't do so good. If he can do that, he does great. The Dustin Jacoby fight, guys, it was very memeish. Like, if they ran that back, do you think he knocks him out again in the first exchange? I mean, maybe, but it seemed to me like, the fight was still just getting going, and he caught him pretty cold, and he put him down. I mean, hats off to him. I think General Joy de Vividi, I hope I did you justice there. I tried my best, says the Devin Clark loss is problematic, and I agree. But the Kennedy and Nzechukwu win. Huge elbow over the top against a durable fighter, easily put him away. The William Knight decision, he took him down at will, guys. He basically just kept hitting one step-through takedown and hit it all night, had no problems there. Went to the split draw with Sam Alvey. Bad look. Knocked out Mike Rodriguez and submitted Khadisi Ibragimov. He was the first guy to ever do so. If you look at Khadisi Ibragimov, he finally lost. He was on an insane win streak post-UFC, right? This guy was out here winning a lot of fights. So shout out to Khadis, the GOAT Ibragimov. But what you've seen is Jung started his career, he had a lot of success, and then he fell on hard times, and he lost 3 fights in a row. He's had a draw. So his career hasn't panned out the way he hoped, but he's got an opponent in front of him in Umar Sy, who's a little bit less experienced, right? He's bigger, right? He's going to be coming in with a huge reach advantage. He's the younger fighter, and he does look more athletic as well. The problem is we just saw we just saw Jung. If we go back, let's go ahead and take a look at Jung. He got taken down by Carlos Ulberg and submitted. He also got knocked down in that fight. He got knocked down by Dustin Jacoby and taken down 3 times by Devin Clark. He also was taken down by Khadisi Ibragimov. So when you look at his resume and his record, it's not blowing your hair back, right? 5 strikes to 4 against Mike Rodriguez, 56 to 59 against Sam Alvey. He got outlanded by Sam Alvey at distance on significant strikes. 28 to 17 against William Knight, unacceptable. 16 to 6 in the knockout win over Kennedy, that's fine. 14-14, he got knocked out by Jacoby. That's just the nature of light heavyweight. 39 to 18 against Devin Clark. That's terrible, man. That's abysmal. 81 to 58 against Carlos Ulberg, at least a step in the right direction. But right now, he's got a negative striking differential, and his takedowns are just not effective enough to go out there and win him every fight. So I think if the fight plays out on the feet, there's probably a decent chance that Dawoon Jung is like a parlay buster type guy in this one, because he can go out there and scrap and compete. And Umar Sy does seem like he's much more comfortable in the wrestling and grappling phases than on the feet. But it's still a light heavyweight fight. I think anything's possible. If you look, KO TKO in his early fights against nobodies. Then the punches KO in KSW. I'll have to go and watch that one. But then punches from the back mount, rear naked choke. He's trying to take all these guys to the ground and get on top of them. If Carlos Solberg can do it, then Sy can do it. But if Sy tries to do it, gets a little tired, and Dawoon Jung, who's been 15 minutes in the UFC before, has more left to offer and isn't like these other guys who are 40 and washed, and he's fighting probably for his career, right? Guys, if he loses this fight, you have to imagine, he's not long for the UFC on a 4-fight losing streak. So for me, I think that's going to be a potential parlay busting material. So I think that when you look at how they set up this fight, they want, C to go out there and win. But it does seem, my guy says, a bet on Jung, Gamblers Anonymous, bro. Too far gone, mate. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but he's 30 years of age. He's 30 years of age, and he's lost 3 fights in a row against guys that I think would be, Carlos Solberg would be favored over Umar Sy, in my opinion. So maybe I'm wrong about that, but it does seem to me like people are ready to cast away Jung right now at 30, and I do think that the line is a little bit off. I don't think that he should be favored, right? That's not what I'm saying, but I do think that this line is presumptuous of cardio and striking fundamentals that I don't think that we're aware of for Sy. And one thing I'll just point out, guys, is it's not that long ago that Vitor Petrino, pretty big guy, strong guy, looks athletic, looks the part, right? Got a couple wins under his belt in the UFC, and people were like, this guy is the second coming. And he washed Anthony Smith and instantly put his head in a guillotine and got finished. So it's just something to keep in the back of our mind, guys. This guy's going to shoot takedowns. What is the one submission that Dawoon Jung has in the UFC? Khadis Ibrahimov, standing guillotine choke, right? Like, again, it's not to say that it's high percentage. It's just to say, is it 0%? I don't think that it is. Shout out to our guy. Nandalal says, can Umar Sy learn how to throw an orthodox jab? That's 99% of Olberg's game. Our guy Cole says, Liam, shout out to the Night Owls. Shout out to the Night Owls. An absolute slug of the coffee. Glenbot says, Jung, round 2, 22-1, round 3, 40-1. Interesting. My guy, MMA Line Mover, is on the Jung money line. Cowabunga, can't wait, brother. Olberg looked small tying up with Jung. Fair play. Thank you, Cowabunga. A month away. Hell yeah. So I hope everybody's making friends in the chat. Have been betting MMA since 2016. I'm quite familiar with the community and how it's grown. With all due respect, I hear what you're saying, Cowabunga, but I'm part of a team. I'm part of a team, my brother. And he's a nice guy. He's a good guy. And I will say the team has done well. If you look, the results are all tracked for the Action Network. And as the team, the things that we've put forward, we've done well. But it's at your own discretion, right? I'm never telling you what to do. I'm just sharing with you, some thoughts and some recommendations. Do your own research, brother, always. Real Fight Pick says, Dawoon Jung by KO plus 1,000 looks curious. Yeah, for a light heavyweight fight, that does seem a little bit weird. Nora Cornell, $8 bare minimum price on FanDuel. Oh, shout out to you, my man. I've never played FanDuel Fantasy, but that's fascinating, and I'm sure some people will be interested. I don't drink coffee because it's 8 a.m. here. Oh, you drink coffee because it's 8 a.m. here. Good man. Liam drinks coffee to entertain us in the middle of the night. Absolutely, my man. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. I appreciate you guys. Thank you all for rocking with me. So with that being said, guys, why don't we go ahead and take a look at the face-off between these two. We missed the one for Lapilus and Morales, so here is that one on the screen. Roberts and Klein. You see the size advantage there for Roosevelt Roberts, but a little bit of that physique advantage for Ludovic Klein. And when people are trying to compare me to UFC fighters, they compare me to Ludovic Klein. So shout out to Ludovic Klein. We've got a fight this weekend, and I hope that we can both do our part and get the job done. But, oh, wait. I was sharing the wrong tab, wasn't I? Oh, brutality. So here we go, guys. This is the one that we were just talking about. Jung looks to be maybe just slightly bigger in the shoulders than Sai, but they're both very big guys. Here's Roberts and Klein, and then Morales and Lapilus. So I think Morales and Lapilus looks virtually like size parity. Roberts and Klein, you obviously see the size difference. And then here, I think that the chest and the back of Daun Jung does look a little bit bigger. Yes, I now realize my mistake, Linbot. Sorry, this is my technological lack of sophistication. Jung getting jabbed in one eye 40 times probably affected his takedown defense in the third round. I agree with you. Good point. Hey, bros. Hey, what's up, Balboa? Sharp guy. My partner with Luca Fury. So shout out to those guys. Another great team that I'm a part of. A little bit different style of work, but Balboa, one of the sharpest in the game. Make sure you show some love to Balboa, and he tweets out a lot of free information as well. So make sure that you show him some love on Twitter. How can you hate Clint? He's a family man, says Billy. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's never about hate, guys. If you want to listen to somebody, you can. If you don't want to listen to somebody, you don't have to. If you want to tail somebody's advice, you can. If you don't want to tail somebody, you don't have to. If you want to fade somebody's advice, you can. If you don't want to fade them, you don't have to. So that's all, and I think that it's better to fade silently than to fade loudly. If you fade loudly, you're a jerk. If you fade silently, you're just going about your business, right? Everybody's free to go about their business. And I always say, God bless and good luck, tail fade or indifferent, right? If you don't care about my plays, cool. If you don't care about my opinion, cool. If you value it, awesome. But it's not going to be perfect. I'm not going to claim that it is. Here's the other thing, though. If you think that I'm a dickhead and you want to fade me, go ahead. But I don't have to sit here and have you tell me that, right? Like, I don't have to sit here and listen to that. So if I'm going to tell you my thoughts, my opinions, and you want to fade them, God bless. But the least you can do is just keep that to yourself. Just go ahead and do whatever you want, right? And if you want to fade anybody else, go ahead and fade them. But keep that information to yourself. In my opinion, that's a classy move, But to each their own. Everybody's got their own style, their own process. I hope that this show and our style can help your process, and that's all we're doing it for. So I think that Daun Jung is a live dog, considering the weight class, considering the volatile nature of light heavyweight, but I also have to acknowledge that I think Sai should be favored. I just think it should be much smaller favorite because he's not as proven. Okay, folks. Now we're back, and it's another light heavyweight fight. This is closing out the preliminary portion of the card. And what we've got here is an Iwan Cutelaba who's 30 years of age. He's way more experienced, both in the UFC and as a professional, but he just hasn't looked like he has the same love for the game and the same enthusiasm last time out. He has a knockout win over Tanner Boser. Some people thought that was a little bit of a premature stoppage. And otherwise, he lost to Kennedy and Zechiku. He got lit up in the first 2 rounds there. He got finished. He got beat by Felipe Lins. Felipe Lins pretty much owned him as an underdog in that fight. Johnny Walker went out there, submitted him in the first round, was able to reverse his wrestling, take his back, and finish him. Ryan Spann put him in the guillotine, cashed a plus 900 submission, So I think that you look at this guy, he's been on this brutal run. His only win is over the no longer with the promotion, Tanner Boser, in his last 5 UFC fights. And prior to that, he's beaten Devin Clark because Devin Clark needs to wrestle. He doesn't have a great striking game. And then the Dustin Jacoby fight, he basically dominates to a 10-8 in round 1, gasses out completely, gets beat up in round 2 and 3. And then you look at a Magomed Ankalaev. They've sent him out there twice to get killed by this guy. So just like they've done Iwan Cutelaba no favors in terms of development. The Glover Teixeira fight, he got beaten in that one after having some success. I mean, for the love of all things holy, he has a win over Khalil Roundtree, who's fighting for the title back in 2019. So this guy has an impressive wins list if you just look at that. But when you go through and start digging into the names that he's lost to, there's some up and down results. A lot of these guys are ranked, though. And the one thing I will note is Ivan Ursan, they're bringing him in. The guy looks like a roid head. The guy looks like a big, built-up guy. And I was able to go out there and watch a bunch of his fights before we got on the air. My man, Luke from Sparring with Reality says, "Sup, Liam, got the late night coffee going. An absolute soldier of fortune. Thank you for showing some love and support, my man." Shout out to Cowabunga as well. He says, "No hate on Clint. Much love there. I appreciate that, my man." He says, "Your style, Liam, is who I recommend to people as well as the Patreon." I appreciate that for sure. "I am entitled to my opinion when it comes to making sure the community bets with a good head on their shoulders." Absolutely. I respect that for sure, brother. No doubt. Regardless of whether or not you like guys' personality. So this is the thing. Again, I like Clinton. I will just say that as far as his participation in the prop squad for Action Network, the prop squad for Action Network has been profitable, right? I can't speak to all his other results. He tracks his own stuff. He does, like, I'm on betmma.tips. He does his own thing. That's why I can't speak to that. But what I can speak to is I've known him personally. He's always been cool to me. He says he bets for entertainment and not for, trying to be Johnny Sophisticado. His information is free. So these are the things that make me feel good about endorsing Clint. He's there with his ass in the jackpot. He puts out the tweet that nobody wants to put out saying, "Hey, I just lost my ass. These were all my bets. These are all the things I did wrong. This is why I feel so stupid right now." And that's the kind of transparency and ownership that I appreciate. But I do recognize you have a right to an opinion, and I'll never say otherwise there, my brother. So thank you, Cowabunga. Thank you for your thoughts and your feedback. And I appreciate that it was a thoughtful response as well. Whenever somebody's hating, that's what I don't like. You're not hating. You're just trying to spread your thought and your feedback, and you're entitled to your opinion. So I appreciate you, brother. But as far as this Ivan Urslan guy goes, he's very basic to me, guys. He's a boxer, right? If you watch his fights, I'll tell you, he's going to come forward. He's probably going to pump out that jab a little bit, right? He's going to be very, upright with this little boxing guard. He's going to move a little bit back and forth, going to do a little two-step in. He's a tough guy. I've seen him take absolute bricks to the face, keep coming forward. I've seen him get dropped a million times. I've only watched like 8 of his fights. The guy gets hit, hurt all the time. But he's tough. So most of the time he gets hit, he gets hurt, he gets back up, he keeps fighting, he keeps pushing, he keeps rocking. He got dropped several times in that title fight that went to a 5-round decision that he lost. And I think that this guy is like a guy that can go out there and beat Cutelaba, no doubt about it. But is his ceiling really high in the UFC? Honestly, I don't think so. What he can do is he can D up a takedown pretty well. From what I saw, I would say I want to watch more of him fighting like a dedicated wrestler because I didn't see a ton of that. But when he was in these fights and guys were trying to mix in a little bit of a takedown here, a little bit of an entry there, he was doing a good job sprawling off on people, forcing them down or forcing them all the way up. Punishing people with strikes as they were trying to take him out. And he has a submission loss on his record. If you go back and watch that fight, it's a club and sub, right? He got dropped badly, and then the guy just like hopped on his back and submitted him. But he basically has just been hurt many, many times in his career. The Hardiak fight, he got knocked out in the first round. The Chuzagayev fight, he got dropped a million times. The Narcan fight, he got club and subbed. The Branko Busic fight, he got brutally knocked out. So that fight appears in yellow, guys, and it's overturned to a no contest. But if you click on it and you can get out of these Polish advertisements, my word, Tapology, you guys got to chill with that. If you go back and look at that, Busic KO'd him badly in the second round, and he failed a drug test, so they overturned the result. But I'm telling you guys, it was a scary one to watch as well. Like, he got hurt really bad and tried to recover desperately, and he was tired and he had a hard time getting back to it. So basic game, meat and potatoes, going to go out there and look to strike, but he could do it for 5 rounds. And Iwan Cutelaba typically is a, got to get an ad blocker, Liam, game changer, says Luke. That's important. I got to get that going. No doubt about it, dude. It's getting ridiculous on Tapology these days. But here's the way I see it. I think that this guy, Ivan Urslan, is basically live to win the fight by knockout or decision. If he wins the fight by decision, I think more often than not, it means he took over in rounds 2 and 3. I think he could win the first round here, but I just have a feeling that if Iwan Cutelaba sells out for his wrestling, like he's known to do at times, he could take him down. I think he could potentially submit him. I will say that Urslan, I noticed a couple times, dips his head for takedowns, and guys were wrapping up guillotines. They were trying to get cute with him, and he was able to get out of them. That's in KSW. That's on the Polish regional scene. That's on some smaller shows. Can he do it in the UFC against a guy like Iwan Cutelaba? I'm not sure. But outside of round one, you know, what Cutelaba can do that would affect Ruslan is that he throws these big winging, like hooking punches. And I will say, guys, if you watch the Ruslan and Chuzagayev fight, Chuzagayev is like a Russian Soviet style boxer. And what I mean by that is instead of a lot of the tight, straight shots, a lot of the stuff that's, you know, coming on these linear patterns, it's a lot more like straight arm casting punches and looping shots and a lot of like looser movement. So that is something that gave him problems in the past. Now, Cutelaba is not somebody you think of with loose movement, right? He's very like stiff and kind of awkward in his own right, but he does throw a lot of wider shots. And I have seen Ruslan, because of that tight guard that he keeps, he's ready for like me and you both exchange straight shots and I land harder. That's kind of his game. It's like I walk forward, I shell up, I throw my punches and I land harder than you. So if you can land harder than him, or if you can, you know, be more clever and creative and create some angles, you could definitely land hard on this guy. And one thing I do worry about is there's two contributing factors in this fight that add to the variance you would normally expect. First of all, it's light heavyweight. So light heavyweight, you make one mistake, you zig when you should zag. Even somebody as terrible as Cutelaba, they hit you with a right hand and you're asleep, right? Or like Khalil Roundtree, they barnstorm you out the gate and he beats you. If they ran that back, who's favored today, right? Khalil is probably favored pretty substantially, but he got ran over by Iwan Cutelaba at the time. If you look at the other element of variance, what would it be? I think that the element of variance that you could see here is it's a UFC debut. Even if this guy was good, even if this guy was super reliable, are we sure that he's going to put forward his best performance, not only in a UFC debut, but this isn't a UFC debut at the Apex after you fought on Contender Series. This is UFC debut in front of a big crowd in Paris, and it's against a guy who's a veteran of how many UFC fights? Let's go check for the Hulk, Iwan Cutelaba. He's had 16 UFC fights, guys. So he's a negative record overall, 6-9-1. It's not saying it's a great record, but this guy's been fighting the best guys in the world, a lot of ranked competition at the top of the division for a long time, and he's training at Extreme Couture. If he loses this fight, he's probably done with his pro MMA career. Certainly his career at this level, I would say, would be over. So probably a high motivation spot for Cutelaba. I wasn't blown away by Ruslan. I've heard a lot of sharp guys I respect on him. I do think Cutelaba sucks. I've always been of that opinion. No disrespect to the guy. Like, just as a prospect, he's going nowhere. He can't fight a sustained 15 minutes. He doesn't have a good head on his shoulders. He's way too emotional. He's a bonehead. All those things are just going to hold you back. But can he go out there and win a fight? Yeah, he still can. So Cowabunga says, Ion has shown very little, I admit, improvement every fight. Patience and cardio. Yeah, that's something to note. I'd like to think he puts it all together this fight. It's very possible. Hard to put hard-earned money on Cutelaba. That's a fact. Cutelaba is going to kill him, says Moyes. I think that's fair play. Ion and Ivan under 1.5 has to be 70 to 80%, don't you think? I do not think. The one thing I will say, Ruslan is a tough guy. So, like, I can imagine Ruslan getting dropped a number of times in this fight. And if Cutelaba is trying not to be a rabid, like, serial killer, then he does train at American Top Team Zagreb, I believe. I don't know if he trains at the American Top Team in the U.S., but I will just say, like, if he was training there when he was having those fights in KSW, there was still a lot to be desired, because it's a very basic game. It's 1-2s. It's the jab. It's a handful of high kicks. He might throw a low kick here and there. There's not a lot of great sophistication. The draw is always live with Cutelaba. He starts very hot. Loser leaves town. Winner gets to test the new Euro Beaver tranquilizers. I absolutely love it. Ion training back in Moldova this camp. So shout out to the Moldovans. Best of luck to you all. Going to look at the odds for this fight. We've got Iwan Cutelaba sitting at a +103 despite his UFC experience. The newcomer, Ivan Ruslan, is sitting at a -123. The fight not to go the distance is sitting about a -600. So they have heavily chalked this out to end inside the distance. Urslan ITD is down at plus 125. So, yeah, they're really shading towards this fight ending early, ending inside the distance, ending under 1.5 rounds. I think that both guys are live to finish. All of Arslan's losses are versus wrestlers and grapplers. Are you sure about that? I mean, I'm not disputing it. I'm sure you could be right. I haven't watched like Chuzagayev and these guys' other fights, but they all outstruck him. You know, at least in the fights I watched, he got outstruck and like knocked down in all of those fights. So I just think he's not a very sophisticated guy, and he's just a brute. You know, he's kind of a meat and potato striker with some power in his hands and half decent sprawl and brawl game. He almost seems like an MMA fighter out of like the early 2000s. If you know what I mean, Moy, it's like he's not a bad fighter per se. He's just like super basic and seems like he's from a bygone era. Kind of stuck in the mud, very stiff. He's like a shitty Shane Carwin at light heavyweight, you know? That's kind of how I put it. The threat of the takedown opens up the strikes. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Man, they weren't, I didn't even see a lot of feinted takedowns, though. These guys just moved around him and danced on him. He was a little bit slow. He's a little bit slow. Ulysses asks, how much tape do you watch a week? It really depends for me on the fight and the fighters. So for Ivan Urslan, I probably just watched like 6 of his fights before we got on the air because I've never heard of the guy prior to this week, and I never watched his fights. That's just the truth of the matter. So for him, I needed to really familiarize myself with his game to have an idea. For a lot of these fighters, I've written up in detail my thoughts on them before, so I refer a lot back to my written work. And then I try and watch 1 or 2 fights, see if it comports with my understanding. Or I'll do things like look at how they did against similar opponents. You'll see a similar archetype, a style, and see how that plays out. Anakin says KSW guys are hard to trust. And particularly, my friend, when you factor in, he's not just running over the KSW guys. He's getting beat by Hardiak. He's getting beat by Chuzagayev. Both those guys have 10 losses between them. He's getting submitted by Narkun after getting dropped on the feet. And Busick, that guy who knocked him out back in the day, is 4-6 as a professional. You know, so he's basically just been beat by a bunch of average guys throughout his career. And maybe he's gotten way better. That's always possible. But Iwan Kutalaba, the one saving grace is most of these guys that beat him are top guys. You know, top light heavyweights. So shout out to everybody who's rocking with us. We just talked about the debuting Ivan Urslan. I think it's a very close fight, but I don't really think there should be big plus money on either side. I think this is an honest, like minus 110 either way. That Chunzagayev guy went 12-3 in ACA in fairness. That's a great point, Luke. And also he's on like a 10-fight win streak or some shit, if I'm not mistaken, or he certainly was in the midst of a really long win streak when he took him on. So yeah, that's not a fight where I say to myself, like, Urslan's a bum, but it's the other fights, right? It's the fact he's always getting dropped. Those are the things that bother me, is that he's just very hittable and very easy to hurt. But Kutalaba, I think you could say the same thing. So that's why I think a pick'em is appropriate here. Maybe, if anything, I would make a slight lean towards Kutalaba on his UFC experience, but I'm surprised UFC kept Ion and not Felipe Lins. That's a bit strange. I think that the long and short of that would be Lins is boring and hard to book, and Ion is willing. You know, he's willing to go out there and take an ass whooping. He's willing to go out there and get knocked out, and he takes a lot of risks. Most of his fights have been finishes, I believe. So I think that's why they keep him around. Kill or be killed type style. But he's probably not long for his UFC contract if he doesn't beat Ivan Urslan. Next up, guys, we got the main card opener, and it is Perez, Smile Killer, Ziam taking on Matt, Steamroller, Frevola. And you know who we're rooting for on this show, right? There's no doubt in my mind that we are 100% rooting for the Steamroller, Matt Frevola. The problem is I can't just come to you guys with who I'm rooting for and what I want to have happen. I have to try and break these things down analytically. And so with love and respect for Matt Frevola and the Frevola family, I think that this could go a couple different ways. I think if Matt is smart, he's going to come out here wrestling and grappling and take this guy down. Matt Frevola is an excellent wrestler and grappler. We've seen that. He's gotten up 10 times from Arman Tsarukyan from the bottom position. That's really impressive, and not many guys can do that. When you look at how else he's performed, he took down Benoit Saint-Denis. Not a lot of people are doing that. He took him down twice. Took him down, got swept, got back up, took him down again, double leg, picked him up, slammed him. It was crazy. This guy, Matt Frevola, is strong, and at 5'9", he's very close to your hips. If you're 6'1", like Perez Ziam, the smile killer, then you're getting a lot of takedown equity, right? You're getting a lot of access to hips, but there's a pro and a con to everything, right? What does easy access to the hips give your opponent? Knees to the head, right? If you're close to their hips, they can knee you in the head without getting their knee super high. They just have to get it up, and they could hit you right in the face. So I think that when you look at a guy like Frevola, you know, you look at Drew Dober. Drew Dober is a puncher, right? And Matt Frevola is a tiny bit faster than him, and he's got a little bit more, you know, I would say Drew Dober's got power. He's got a little bit more hand speed, so he had a little bit better defense. He was able to slip off line of these shots from Drew Dober, fire back, bing, bang, boom, knocks out Drew Dober. I had picked in that fight Matt Frevola inside the distance, Matt Frevola by submission. I thought he was going to submit Drew Dober because he does have a good ground game. Go back and watch the Jalen Turner fight in 2019. Matt Frevola audited him on the mat, just took him down, passed his guard, did whatever he needed to do to win the fight. But he went on a stretch, guys, from 2019 until the Benoit Saint-Denis fight where he recorded no takedowns, right? And so when there was no takedowns, Matt Frevola is a guy that can get sparked, right? He can get hit. He can get clipped in the chin. He's been dropped. He's been hurt. He's been knocked out before. He's been dropped. He's been knocked down twice in more than one UFC fight, right? He's been to a draw with Lando Venata because he got dropped twice. And he also has been finished in a couple of these fights. He's been hurt. He's been knocked out with a head kick. He's been dropped with a punch in 7 seconds. So you look at the Terrence McKinney fight for both these guys, right? Like my guy Anakin mentioned in the chat. He says both these guys lost to McKinney. And you look at how. McKinney recorded no takedowns against Ziam. Ziam like just got tangled up with him in a scramble, gave up his back, and the fight was over before it began. Same thing for Frevola, but on the feet. You know, Terrence McKinney went out there, threw a left hand, it hit Frevola on the chin. That was the end of the fight. Right? He used his length, he used his reach, and that was the fight. Matt doesn't have the best durability you've ever seen. He's very talented. He's very skilled. He can go with anybody. But Lando Venata hurt him really bad. And we could go through the list, and a lot of guys that he's fought have hurt him really bad. And it's unfortunate because there's certain things you can train, like your hands, like your feet, like your footwork. But you can't train your chin. And he has 3 losses via knockout as a professional. You know, in the UFC, 3 of his 4 losses are via knockout. He got head kicked by Benoit Saint-Denis last November, and now he's making the turnaround this September, right? He's in his mid-30s. He got hurt in the Genaro Valdez fight. They went back and forth. They swung wild. He dropped him a million times. He killed him. He absolutely dummied his Itar, and he beat up Drew Dober. So hats off to him for those. Those are both great wins. He got audited by Arman Tsarukyan in the wrestling, but there's literally no shame in that. And Arman would do the same thing to Perez Ziam, right? And then you look at Terrence McKinney, and McKinney knocked him out. So it's just a tough go at it. But then you look at the Marco Polo Reyes fight. He gets knocked out in the first round there after getting signed from Contender Series. His last win via submission, guys, was back in 2017 against Luke Flores. So there is a chance that so here's the thing. My guy Glenbot asked me, Liam, do you really think Ziam has KO upside? I hadn't really pictured Ziam finishing Matt in my head. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Why do I feel that way? Is Polo Reyes some devastating puncher? You know, you go back and look, and Polo Reyes, 12 wins by knockout, 6 losses by knockout. So I guess he was just killer be killed puncher, but he dropped him real bad. Lando Venata, let's go look at how many career knockouts Lando has. So Lando has 4 knockouts in his career, guys. He dropped Frevola twice badly. That's why that fight went to a draw. So Frevola's tough. He'll dig deep, but he's had all these canceled bouts as well. That was coronavirus. Frevola had a cornerman test positive. He fractured his foot. Okay, so just making sure these are all forgivable cancellations. So yeah, most of these cancellations aren't his fault, excuse me, but He's 5-4 in the UFC, so he's got a good record, a solid record, but nothing, that'll blow your hair back. Meanwhile, guys, Perez Ziam is a young man, very young man in the game. He's 5'2", or he's 5'2". He's 5-2. This is how you can tell I've been writing for too long today and not drinking enough coffee. Oh, the coffee slamboree was absolutely essential. Guys, if you haven't seen it, I would encourage you, go to my Twitter, go to my X, and you can go look and see. I posted it earlier. It's a video of Perez Ziam absolutely starching his opponent. And it was Lapilus's brother, right? Damian Lapilus. He starched Damian Lapilus early in his career with a head kick knockout. In the UFC, he's yet to record a knockdown. He's yet to record a knockout. Is that sustainable? Is he never going to record one? Maybe, right? Like maybe he's just going to be one of those guys that never has any power. But he does have finishes outside of the UFC, right? Plenty of them. The majority of his wins, submissions and knockouts. In the UFC, he hasn't been able to translate one yet. But then you look at Matt Frevola, and he has been finished in the majority of his losses, right? And I don't expect him to get submitted here, but we know that he likes to go out there and trade. We know he likes to get in the ruckus. We know he likes to fight. And I do think that when you look at how you lose this fight, Ziam's long. They call him the smile killer. He's a long guy. He can hit you from very far away. And so if you want to go out there and take a lot of risk and be wild, you could definitely, see that go the wrong way for Frevola. And so, like I said off the rip, guys, New York in the building. We're rooting for our Renzo Gracie brother. We're rooting for our Cerro Longo brother, Matt Frevola. Nothing would make me happier than to see the steamroller win. But when it was Benoit Saint-Denis, I called Benoit Saint-Denis via KO1 because this is a business, right? Like Tony Soprano said, this is a business. And I have to give you guys my honest opinion. I could still be wrong, but I have to give you my honest opinion. And a lot of people said to me, bro, be on Frevola against BSD. Come with me on this bet. And I said, I can't do it because I don't see it. If I don't see it, I won't say it. And I think Frevola can win this fight if he goes out there and grapples. I think he could make it look easy, but he doesn't grapple enough for my liking. He does not wrestle enough for my liking in these fights. He did it against Saint-Denis, and he still got KO'd. Against Perez Ziam looked like a fish against Terrence McKinney. But other than that, he's done a very good job in terms of managing these fights. Claudio Puelles is known for, if I get you down a bunch of times, it's going to be my decision, or I'm going to stretch that knee. And he was able to do neither against Perez Ziam. It was a close fight, but Perez Ziam found a way to win. And he's done that a number of times. There's been several fights throughout his career where he's been taken down 3, 4, 5 times. He still won the decision. So I think that Perez Ziam is a guy on the come up. I think he continues to get better. He trains with good guys. He's got a big, long frame, solid. But when it comes to wrestling and grappling, size disparities create opportunities. Matt Frevola can use his strength, his leverage, his scrambling ability, his natural tendencies on the mat to get the advantage here. But I haven't seen him attempt a submission in the UFC since the Jalen Turner fight, if my memory serves. And he's a guy that has fallen in love with the hands. He likes going out there and exchanging and trading. And coming off of a KO loss, he's probably going to want to get it back. He's going to want to go out there and show this young kid that I could do this. I can knock you out. I could take your head off. And he can. But if he gives him opportunities to counter with that knee, with those uppercuts, with the long shots, with the straight movements, the younger guy who's never been dropped in the UFC is probably just going to have too many opportunities to connect with that chin. So I really am rooting for Matt, but it's a tough fight. All right, guys, let's go ahead and talk Morgan Charrier and Gabriel Miranda. And this is a fight where I do think we have a somewhat live underdog. Gabriel Miranda is a big guy. He's undefeated so far in the UFC in the featherweight division. Granted, his only win is over Shane Young, but he took out Shane Young immediately. And my write-up said Shane Young was going to get submitted in the first round. Shane Young got submitted in the first round. Gabriel Fly Miranda took down Benoit Saint-Denis, just like Matt Frevola. And, he created some crazy pace, right? He was in Paris. He showed up on short notice. He was brought in to be a lamb to slaughter, and he gave an honest fight. He gave a honest account of himself. He didn't have enough that night. He was against a big, strong, heavy-handed Frenchman with a whole country behind him, and he got clipped. But he went out there and showed what his mettle was, what his spirit was. He really tried to win the fight. And you look at his follow-up performance, he just dominates Shane Jung using his size, right? He cut down, instead of short notice at 55, it's fully prepared at 145. He looked like a different fighter. And now Gabriel Fly Miranda, he's definitely up there in age, guys. He's not a young man. And if the fight gets extended, he's probably going to get finished, right? But he's 34 and a hook. He's taking on this 28-year-old going on 29. Like, Morgan Chartier is the one being set up for success here. But is Miranda not capable of subbing him? I mean, I don't know. Let's go revisit this, guys. Morgan Chartier has been submitted one time in his career, okay? And it was back in, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling right now. It was back in 2015, June of 2015. He got submitted by Jean Luau, who was 3-4 at the time. He ended his career 5-8, and he got submitted by that guy. And that guy was 2-0 career to the submission as a professional. So it wasn't like he was a submission actor by trade. Then you look at, okay, this guy has a propensity to go out there and lose close split decisions. So that we know that about him. Then you look at the fact Manolo Zucchini is his UFC win. Like, is Manolo Zucchini a better UFC win than Shane Jung? I would say at best it's comparable, right? So you have a younger, probably more dynamic athlete in Morgan Chartier, but he's giving up 2 inches in height and reach. Excuse me, he's giving up 3 inches in height, 2 inches in reach. He's 6 years younger. So like, he's got anthropomorphic advantages, but if this fight was to get into a competitive wrestling and grappling match, this guy just had a competitive wrestling and grappling match with Chepe Mariscal, who's not a bad wrestler and grappler. He's very solid. He's got a judo background. He's very good, but he's not blow your hair back like the best you've ever seen. So I do question to myself, I'm like, exactly where is this Morgan Chartier guy at? I think like BSD, that like, this is the last thing I'll say about this fight because I don't want to belabor the point. When you look at BSD, he closed somewhere between -280 and -3XX against Gabriel Fly Miranda, up a weight class on short notice. Why is this guy, Morgan Chartier, who's 10 times been to a draw, split, or majority decision, and he has been submitted before, which is Miranda's primary path to victory, why is that guy -700 and Benoit Saint-Denis wasn't? That's the only thing that can't compute for me, right? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Something was wrong, right? Either that Benoit Saint-Denis line was way under what it should have been, or this line is a little bit too wide on Morgan Chartier. And for me, I think it is too wide on Chartier. I think he should win. I think ABC say always bet on cardio. I think he does have superior cardio because of his age. But for about 7.5 minutes, I think you've got a live underdog in Gabriel Miranda. He does throw wild power with his hands. He's never really knocked anybody out. But if he buzzes somebody, he's trying to hop on their neck. That's why. So I do think he's going to swing wild. He's going to go out there and try and finish. He's going to try and kill. And if desperation calls, if he can get a body triangle for 8 minutes of this fight, he could still eke out a close split decision. But I do favor Chartier. I think he should be favored. It's about numbers, guys. And I do think at -7XX is price prohibitive. I would be looking, if anything, for Chartier, either late round props, Chartier KO, something like that. A twirled mustache in France is a thumbs up. It's like a dead animal in the U.S. Paul Hughes had him in bad spots too. Absolutely terrible spots. Took his back. The Irish taught him how to grapple once again, which we absolutely love to see. My guy Jewish Better with a laughing emoji says Miranda decision. JJ says Miranda is 34, but he's capable. I totally agree with you. So a lot of really great, sharp comments from the chat. And what we'll do is we'll put up this face-off on screen. So first of all, guys, we will make sure that we're sharing our screen here. Okay. So here we go. This was our last one with Kutalaba and Urslan. Then we've got Ziam and Frevola coming into frame here. Shout out to the good people at MMA Junkie as well for making this available. And then here we go, guys. Look at Gabriel Fly Miranda. Bigger man, the larger individual in this fight. The guy who's, I'd say, the clear better grappler. And yet, he is a massive underdog in this spot, not being given much credit or respect. But notice one thing, guys, one thematic note. A lot of former BSD opponents have found their way onto this card, and I don't know if that's good or bad for them, right? But a Matt Frevola is on the card, a Gabriel Fly Miranda is on the card. And these are a couple guys that Benoit Saint-Denis put through the meat grinder. So something to keep in the back of your mind here, folks. And what I'm going to do real quick, guys, is give me about 10 seconds or less, and I am going to plug in my laptop so it does not die while we finish the show. Shout out to you guys. Shout out to the chat. Your boy saw that 11% creep up in the corner and knew that if I didn't go ahead and put that charger in, we were going to be ending the show early. And I was going to have to be scrambling to get my StreamYard back on to end the stream. So thank you guys for your patience and understanding. We are right back to it. And I think that my write-up for this fight was pretty straightforward. It's either Miranda by sub in the first round, or it's probably Chatier by TKO 2-3 or a decision. But if it goes to decision, it'll be a split just because that's how this guy gets down. You know what I'm saying, folks? In any case, though, we've got next up one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, and I'm embarrassed that I am not wearing my Brian Battle t-shirt right now, but I did wear it, I think, on the Contender Series this week for good omen. We've got our guy, Brian Battle, coming back off the Ange Lusa ass whooping of the year. A lot of people before that fight were selling Ange Lusa like he was something he wasn't. And with no disrespect to Ange Lusa, he was not on Brian Battle's level, right? I don't think that he was pre-fight. I don't think he looked like he was on the night. I think he was showing the levels, right? And you can point to the stats or whatever you want. Watch the fight, right? And when you watch the fight, I think you saw there was a class difference between the two. There was an intensity difference between the two. And by the end of the fight, one guy wanted to be there, one guy didn't. And I think that was before the eye poke, honestly. So when you look at the Kevin Jousset side of things, I have not given him enough credit in the past. And I want to go ahead and correct the record. Somebody had pointed out in my comment section, and I want to always say, thank you to people who comment. Thank you to people who share feedback. If it's respectful, if it's, a good faith in attempt to reach out to me, I will always try and answer. I will always try and interact. I appreciate those kind of interactions with you guys. So thank you so much. And somebody pointed out to me that Kevin Jousset has a background in judo. So I looked into it, and he has a black belt in judo. He has a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Both of these guys have purple belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So both of them should be of commensurate rank there. The one thing I will note is a consistent theme throughout Brian Battle's career has been the takedown defense as a potential liability. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a peek over at UFC stats. So if anybody has an anthropomorphic advantage in this fight, it is Brian Battle, albeit very slight. There's a 1-inch height advantage for Jousset. There's a 2-inch reach advantage for Battle, and he's also 1 year younger. But for me, that's basically offsetting, right? I feel like it's a virtual wash in those categories. So then what we would look at is the UFC stats page, okay? And if I share this tab with you guys, what you'll see, Brian Battle, the things we discussed in terms of the height and reach, but here's what we'll also notice. Jousset, over a 2-fight sample, a very short sample we should add, has a insane volume of 8.23 significant strikes per minute and 5.1 absorbed. On the other side, Brian Battle, 3.7 absorbed. So he's absorbing way less damage. However, he's not putting out that same jarring amount of output, just 4.5 significant strikes per minute for Brian Battle. So almost 4 less strikes output per minute, but he's absorbing, basically 1.25 less strikes per minute. The defense and the accuracy numbers are better for Jousset, but what's important to note is Jousset has fought Kenan Song and Kiefer Crosby on short notice. Kiefer Crosby on short notice outlanded him in round 1, but Kiefer Crosby is also a known gasser and with all due respect, a guy who does quit under adversity, and he was forced to quit under the adversity in that fight in the first round. So, or if I'm wrong, it was the second round he got exhausted. But in any case, the guy just didn't have the cardio to go, and Jusei was able to get him out of there. When you look at the Jusei and Kenan Song fight, he landed 136 or so significant strikes. That, for me, is what's really impressive about Jusei. If you don't defend yourself, he will land all night. He'll touch, chip away. He got one takedown in that fight as well. He got one takedown against Kiefer Crosby. So he's been keeping it pretty basic across the board. Get a takedown when you need it. Land as many strikes as you can on the feet. And he's got the judo, so he's not easy to barrel over. He's got decent hips. He's lost some fights on activity. If you go back to his regional scene, Kevin Jusei has 2 losses. One is to Jack Della Maddalena. You give him a complete pass on that. But the Caleb Rideout fight, he just got outworked to a split decision by a 6-2 at the time, now 7-3 fighter from the Australian regional scene. So Caleb Rideout isn't a bad fighter, but he's also not a world beater. And, when you look at the tough guys he's fought basically in his career, it was JDM, it was Caleb Rideout, and he lost both those fights, albeit a doctor stoppage and a split decision, close enough. And then Kenan Song and Kiefer Crosby. And none of those names are like, wow, like blow your hair back. Those are really, really good, right? Meanwhile, you look at Bryan Battle, and we'll go ahead and look at his resume, okay? So now we're talking Bryan Battle, and we're talking about his streak so far in the UFC. So he's had 4 fights, I believe, in this welterweight division that he's won. AJ Fletcher, Gabe Green, Takashi Sato, and then unfortunately the Angelusa fight didn't count, right? So what we saw essentially is Bryan Battle went out there and AJ Fletcher did buzz him on the feet. That's something to keep in mind. But he was able to take him down, beat him up, get to the rear naked choke position, did everything right there. Against Angelusa, he was beating him up. I had round 2 and round 3 for Bryan Battle. I had no doubt in my mind he was going to finish him in round 2 or round 3. And unfortunately, we didn't get a natural conclusion to that contest. I bet Bryan Battle plus 1,000 to win by knockout against Gabe Green. How'd that one age, guys? You probably never see 10-1 on Bryan Battle to win by knockout ever again. But he had Gabe Green sprint across the octagon and cash that bet in about 11 seconds. So thank you to Gabe Green. The other 3 seconds were ground and pound and a mere formality from the referee. But Bryan put him down with a shocking quickness there. Then you look at the Renat Fakhretdinov fight. And one thing that I don't think gets remarked upon, Bryan Battle got dropped instantly in that fight. And so, yes, his takedown defense didn't look great. Yes, he got owned, right? He got, just call it what it is. He got owned. 14 minutes of control time for Renat Fakhretdinov. But he never broke his spirit. He never made Bryan Battle quit. Bryan had every opportunity to give up, right? He's getting dominated in every position, essentially. Never did so. Kept finding a way to try and stay in the fight. He just was beat by a better man on the night, okay? So then you look at how he would address that, how he would go try and improve on that. And I think that we're seeing a Bryan Battle who, instead of going out there and trying to go crazy off the rip, I think he is trying to be a little bit more composed and within himself. I think we saw that in the Angelusa fight. I think we saw a little bit more patience, a little bit more poise from Bryan Battle. I think the 2 things I'm worried about for Bryan in this fight are, can he avoid getting taken down, and can he avoid getting touched on the chin? Because he has been buzzed and hurt before, and he has been taken down. And if those are, 2 liabilities, it's going to give me a little bit of pause at the favorite price tag. But when I look at the intangibles, I think that Bryan Battle is a more marketable fighter. I think that he is the only fighter from the Ultimate Fighter brand that is currently on a very positive trajectory. Maybe a Myron Santos would be somebody you'd consider from a recent season of the Ultimate Fighter who has some prospect status in the UFC. But half of these fighters are in and out. Juliana Miller, right? What's her legacy going to be from the Ultimate Fighter? And it seems like Bryan Battle is one of the last real Ultimate Fighter winners. You know what I mean? And he went out there, and not only did he beat Gilbert Urbina at 185, but he actually went out there at 170, or excuse me, at 185 and beat Trayshawn Gore as well, the guy who was supposed to be the top dog on the season who couldn't finish the show. And then Brian has since dropped to 170, where he's a lot bigger and a lot more suited for the weight class. So for me, these guys have a lot of similarities, right? They're both the same belt rank in jiu-jitsu. They're both big guys for this welterweight division. They're both tough as shit. I just think the difference is Bryan Battle has been here in the UFC a little bit longer, getting this relevant experience. And I think that for Kevin Jousset, now he's doing this homecoming. He's got a big, important fight in front of his home fans, and that's a lot of pressure, right? And I do think that this is his hardest fight in the UFC. I think Brian still has a chip on his shoulder from the Ange Loosa fight. I think he's still got a lot to prove. And I do think that Bryan Battle has the ability to finish this fight with his submission skill, which I know sounds counterintuitive. But Bryan Battle isn't a guy that submits people based on jiu-jitsu. He submits people based on pace, based on hurting people, and based on making them make bad decisions, suboptimal decisions in the wrestling and the grappling. Andre Petroski is a 185-pounder, and he's typically very good in terms of his jiu-jitsu, right? That's a selling point for him in terms of how he gets his wins. He's 4-0 career to the submission prop. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, but he did get submitted one time, right? And who submitted him? Bryan Battle on The Ultimate Fighter. That's why it doesn't show on his resume. So I think of Bryan Battle as a guy who is crafty with the subs, dangerous with his submission game, powerful with his knockout ability. He's got a lot of different skills and attributes. He can fight on the back foot, which a lot of guys cannot do, and he can mix in the wrestling. But I will just say, Jousset deserves some respect, right? I do hear a lot of people dismissing him, and when I looked into his skill, a judo black belt, I'll just say this, guys, judo around the world is taken a lot more seriously than it is in the United States. The participatory rates are higher, and France is a place where judo is quite good. I think that despite coming from city kickboxing, Jousset is a little bit rigid. He's a little bit stiff. He's a little bit awkward when he strikes. I think his hand speed is slower than Brian. I think Brian can have some success boxing with him. But I also think that he hits pretty hard. I also think that he's very consistent with his volume. I think that, Brian's been knocked down. He hasn't been knocked down yet. So could it happen? Yes. He got doctor stopped by Jack Della, but he's a guy that's pretty durable, it seems. And he's got a judo background, so his hips could be pretty good. So it just doesn't seem like there's any one way to easily dominate this guy and get over on him. You could outpace him. You could outwork him. That's still a hard fight. And so for me, I ended up picking Battle by 2, 3, or decision, but it wasn't with the amount of confidence I was expecting to have. I'm still a huge Bryan Battle fan. I think they could have given him easier fights, but I think that he could still go out there and win and do so in entertaining fashion after a fun fight. I think round 1 is going to be a scrap, but I do think that Bryan Battle is used to these hard 3-round fights, and I don't know that Jousset is ready for that kind of resistance here. Shout out to my guy Luke, says Battle was plus 140 against Gore. Good times, absolutely. My guy Glenn says, I don't think Battle will KO Jousset. I tend to agree. Might get the moments, and the grappling could be even. Decision might get greasy for Battle. Yeah, I think you're on the nose there. It's very possible. Feel like Jousset will have Battle covered everywhere, huh? Not to mention, if it's close, that hometown cooking is going to hit different in Paris. That's very possible. He's the underdog of the week. Best of luck, my guy. Battle has that Diego Lopes type aura right now. He's either going to catch on fire or he's overconfident. Fair play. Jousset seems a little slow to me. Yes, I agree. Battle has the reach advantage. Yes, he does. Although the height slightly offsets that fact. Olivas picked Jousset. Shout out to Olivas. This is Air Juicy first fight in France. Interesting. I think I would have to imagine it's Bryan Battle's first fight in France too. North Carolina Day. I didn't know that. I love that though. The toughest man in all of North Carolina right there. Birthday boy, Battle, KO round 2 incoming. Shout out to you, AWMD. You know that we're rooting for Bryan Battle, right? Just like we're rooting for Matt the Steamroller Frevola, we're rooting for Bryan Battle always on this show. Bryan Battle's a cool-ass dude, and I just like his fighting spirit. In terms of American fighters, I like this guy, Bryan Battle. He's fun as shit. He's funny as shit. He's a cool dude, so best of luck to him. And I think it's going to be a fun, good fight, but I definitely don't think it's going to be as easy as I once thought. Respect to Jousset. I think Battle can take over late, but, you know, he's got to survive those early sketchy moments that he's had a few times in the UFC. Next up, guys, we've got one of my favorite UFC fighters taking on one of my least favorite UFC fighters. Joanderson Brito is taking on William Gomis. And listen, William Gomis, I mentioned before, has that French style of retreating, skirting around the outside, being very particular with his shots, a lot of kicks, a lot of rangy stuff, teeps to the body. He's not bad, though, right? If you look at his skill set, he's gone out there and eked out a close one over Jarno Aarons, eked out a close one over Francis Marshall, and then beat Yannis Gamori, who is no good. You know, I bet Yannis Gamori in that fight at like plus 230 because he had a wrestling background, he had a kickboxing background. I was like, you know what? Like Gomes is kind of a weasel, right? He goes out there, he wins these close decisions. And I thought he was trending towards winning that decision, but then the low blow, they just call it off. And it was a French fighter against a French fighter, but obviously Gomis was the local market guy there. But how did we get to this fight? There was supposed to be a fight with Gomes and Almeida, and Lucas Almeida withdrew. So then they tried to book this year, right? That was last year in September. Then they tried to book the Melsik Bagdasaryan fight this year, and Gomes withdrew from a scheduled bout. Then they book him against John Silva. And if you guys remember, he actually weighed in for the fight. And then they canceled the fight because of weight cut complications. He was shaking on the scale. He looked like shit. And so they canceled the fight. And now, if we go ahead and share our screen over on Tapology, we'll take a look at the Jaguar, William Gomis, and Tuborao, the shark, the muscle shark, Joanderson Brito. And this is a direct styles clash, okay? What you have in Joanderson Brito is a much smaller man. He's 5'8" compared to 6 foot tall. He's 72-inch reach compared to 73-inch reach, and he's 2 years older. So all the anthropomorphic advantages are on the William Gomis side. However, Joanderson Brito has the better resume. He has more wins. He has more professional experience. He has more UFC experience, and he is the superior grappler by far. If you look at William Gomis, guys, there's been several notable failures throughout his UFC career that have not been capitalized on. If we go over and refer to UFC stats, what I'll do is I'll pull this tab up, and on UFC stats, guys, you'll notice this right here. We've got William Gomis and Joanderson Brito, right? William Gomis gave up 2 takedowns and 2 submission attempts to Francis Marshall. He had a fully locked-in rear naked choke. He just could not put him away, right? Then you look at the fight with Jarno Aarons. Jarno Aarons, guys, had a fully locked-in triangle choke from the bottom position in guard, and I just don't think he had the cardio to sustain it, right? Gomes did the right things to pull out of it, but also Jarno is just a guy that kind of fights in waves, right? And he didn't have the ability to keep pushing, keep squeezing. It's a very labor-intensive hold. Then against Yannis Gamori, it was Gomis that had the only 2 submission attempts of the fight, but he didn't have any takedowns. You know, his takedown game is pretty basic. When he was taking down Jarno, it's because Jarno was straight up and down in the air. He's a very upright Dutch kickboxing style. Joanderson Brito is low to the ground. He's going to be very difficult, in my opinion, for Gomis to take down. And Brito probably has most of the wrestling and grappling upside here. When you look at Brito, he had 3 takedowns against Diego Lopes and absolutely dominated to a decision. You know, and Lopes threw up some good submission attempts. He really fought back from the bottom, but that win has aged really well. Then you look at the Bill Algeo fight, and honestly, Brito just gassed himself out trying to wrestle too hard. He was lifting too much. He was throwing his weight around. He got exhausted, and Bill just was able to pick him apart late, get his own takedowns, and just out-volume him. You look at the Andre Fili fight. It was one of my favorite cashes of all time, plus 200, plus 250, I think it was. Brito money line, plus 1,000 ITD. He sparked him in like 2 minutes. So great fight there, great win. Then against Lucas Alexander, he easily takes him down, takes his back, and chokes him, right? Then you look at the Weston Wilson fight. This is where it gets weird. Weston Wilson had a pretty solid knee bar attempt on Joanderson Brito. And Joanderson Brito was able to punch his way out of it and knock the guy out. But I'm telling you, like, that told me Weston Wilson was going to submit Jekka Sergi, right? Was that he could almost submit Joanderson Brito, who is very solid and defended 3 submission attempts from Diego Lopes, right? Then you look at the Jonathan Pierce fight. And again, you see some of the flaws with Brito is that he can lose minutes. He can be controlled. He could be negated offensively. The most significant strikes he's ever landed so far in a UFC fight was against Diego Lopes. He landed 44. He's a prolific finisher. That's part of the reason why he's not landing that many strikes. But still, guys, it's something to keep in the back of our mind. That fight technically went to a technical decision. He went to decision against Algeo, landed just 40, right? So then you look at the Jonathan Pierce fight. He had landed 8 significant strikes through more than half of the fight. He just happened to grab that ninja choke and put him away. It was awesome. It was gangster. It was really cool. But he really didn't do, a great job prior to that. He just did what he needed to. And he was motivated, right? Get up and do somebody, boy. And he said, okay, I will get up and submit you, sir. But when you look at this, guys, you just see a Joanderson Brito who's a killer, but he's also a guy that takes a lot of risks. He's a guy that is a very emotional fighter. And for me, if he's not able to finish this fight, it is probably going to be a super greasy fight, guys. If you're throwing 40 significant strikes, right, and chasing somebody around the octagon and getting frustrated, that's not going to be a great look for the judges, especially for a hometown fighter in their local market. That's a winnable fight for William Gomis. Here's the thing. If Joanderson Brito gets this guy down, I don't think he's letting him off the hook like Francis Marshall. I don't think he's letting him off the hook like these other guys, Jarno Aarons. I think he's going to put him away. I think that if Joanderson Brito is able to take this guy down, take his back, he's probably going to choke him silly. If you look, William Gomis was submitted by Morgan Charrier, of all people, right? Morgan Charrier in his career is 3-1 to the submission. Back in 2016, he heel hooked William Gomis. That tells me that Joanderson Brito can absolutely submit this guy. Okay. So whether he does or not, that's still yet to be seen. Joanderson Brito is a wild man. He's a little reckless, doesn't always make the best decisions, right? The Bill Algeo fight's a perfect example. In my opinion, if he went out there to strike with Bill Algeo, he would fuck him up. But instead, he went out there to wrestle with Bill Algeo, exhausted himself, and then he had nothing left in rounds 2 and 3. So lesson learned, I think, for Brito. Now that Jack Shore performance was a really smart showing. He went out there, he butchered his leg, and he forced the referees to intervene. I think that he could do the same thing to Gomis in terms of blast his leg, compromise his movement, and then beat him up a little on the feet, go for your takedowns. But I do just think that when you imagine this fight, I would think Brito scorecards no action is better than his money line here because he could win a decision, but I don't think it's a great fight for him if this fight goes the distance. I like Gomis' work on the cage, but I think he's out physicaled here. Absolutely he is. I see Brito shooting double legs in the open mat, probably. Glenbot says, I might just Dutch Brito's round 1 and round 2 because I can't decide between the KO or sub. I don't know that we've ever seen Gomis on the verge of being knocked out. I'd have to revisit that, but I definitely have seen him in really bad grappling situations. So that's just what I'm thinking there. Shout out to the Jewish Better. Says, Gomis is very good and technical with his pathways back to his feet and initial takedown defense on the fence is money. Fair play. Francis Marshall, if you remember that fight, guys, he got so frustrated over the course of that fight because the guy just fought him moving in reverse all night. And I could see the same thing happening to Brito from an emotional standpoint if he's unable to find success. Okay. Now, guys, what I want to do is briefly say we've got 105 people rocking with us live on YouTube. If you're rocking with us live, go ahead and just drop a like on this video. Get subscribed to the channel. We're talking UFC fights here each and every week, trying to bring you guys facts and evidence, UFC stats, Tapology, the betting odds, everything that you could possibly look for, as well as these face-offs. So as we move to these next fights, the co-main event and the main event of the evening, let's go ahead and take a look at these face-offs here. Jusei and Battle. These guys squaring up. They look around the same size, maybe a slight advantage for Jusei in the height as we expected. And if y'all haven't seen this, there was a little altercation here with Gomis and Brito. Look at this here for 1 second, guys. Gave him the yank. Did y'all see that? Gave him the yank. Almost yanked his arm out the socket. So a little bit of poor sportsmanship from Joe Anderson Brito there. But, you know, he's obviously the smaller guy and the foreigner, so he's looking to play a little mind games. Then you've got the always clad in a cool-looking hat, Brendan Allen taking on the local market fighter, Nasruddin Imavov. Imavov is a Russian, guys. He's the Russian sniper, but he represents Paris. He goes out there and does the damn thing. He could speak the language. He trains there, lives there. So he gets a lot of respect from the local market. He did go out there and win in Paris against Joaquin Buckley. He's 1-0 in the UFC in Paris. And you look at Brendan Allen on the other side, guys. He did not want to fight in France. He was very adamant about that. He said, I will not fight Imavov in France unless we're the main event. Here he is in the co-main event anyway, and he has alleged, okay, you could take this for whatever it's worth. You could say it's an excuse. You could say it's true. You could do your own research here. But Brendan Allen put out a video where he said that the French Commission is corrupt, that the French Commission is looking for, excuses to make him and Renato Moicano spend half the night awake while their opponents are up there sleeping after the weigh-in, saying that they are trying to take extra blood from them, saying they're trying to make them pee as they're dehydrated, all this different stuff that he said is totally abnormal for a commission. So you basically have the French Commission working, on behalf of Imavov and Benoit Saint-Denis, if this guy, Brendan Allen, is to be believed, okay? And Brendan is a solid guy, right? He's a solid fighter in terms of he's got well-rounded abilities. He's got that devastating open side body kick that we saw him destroy Punahele Soriano with. We know that he can box a little bit. We know his ground game is sensational. Ton of wins by rear naked choke. Submitted black belts, submitted good guys, defeated a lot of high-quality guys in the UFC. But when you look at Nasruddin Imavov, he's a talented fighter in his own right, guys. He's a guy that's worthy, I think, of a lot of respect. We're going to go ahead and take a peek at the Tapology here. We've got, obviously, more experience, right, on the side of Brendan All-In Allen. He is 28 years of age, guys. So these guys are roughly the same age, right? Virtual age parity at 28. But Brendan Allen has more professional experience, 29 professional bouts, many of them over 10 at the UFC level. Let me go check. 14 fights, guys. 12 wins in the UFC. This guy, Brendan Allen, has a sensational resume, period, point blank. Nasruddin Imavov, on the other hand, he has not been as active, but 6-2 in the UFC. Very good record in his own right. Half the wins, same amount of losses, one no contest. But when you look at Nasruddin Imavov, he just got the win over Jared Cannonier. Very impressive win. Very solid win. A win that told you he's coming on. The Roman Dolidze win shows you can fight over 5 rounds. And by the way, he absolutely blasted Roman Dolidze. If you guys remember, it's one of my favorite sequences. You're seeing a lot more people implement this technique. I do not have the flexibility to do shit like this. But the rear waist cinch, he's kicking him in the head from the rear waist cinch because he's not flexible. And we saw Roman Dolidze get absolutely rocked and stunned by that head kick that he never saw coming from Imavov. And guys, Roman Dolidze is tough as an old leather boot. He is, in my opinion, more durable than Brendan Allen by a pretty significant, margin. And he was badly hurt and compromised in that fight. Very, very nearly finished. If you look, Roman Dolidze, guys, he's only had 16 professional MMA bouts, but he's never been stopped with strikes. 7-0 career to the knockout. He's never been finished as a pro. All 3 of his losses by decision. And I think all 3 of them are to ranked UFC fighters. But in any case, right, you look at this guy, and Nasruddin Imavov dominated Dolidze over 5 rounds. He beat Jared Cannonier in the 4th round. Whether you think the stoppage was premature, he hurt him badly in the 4th round. So he's still carrying that power. Then you see the Sean Strickland fight, guys. This was a short notice bout because he had to accept it. I think he was supposed to fight Kelvin Gastelum, and Gastelum pulled out short notice, right? So then he has to fight Sean Strickland at a catch weight. It was light heavyweight, and this dude weighs in 194. So Nasruddin Imavov does his weight cut. Then they tell him, yeah, it's going to be Sean Strickland on short notice. And then Sean Strickland, who always has 5-round cardio, even off the couch, comes in and was able to beat him by just out-leveraging his cardio. And meanwhile, Imavov went from having a really easy setup type matchup against Kelvin, where he could have out-wrestled him, where he could have out-grappled him, where he could have outstruck him, and where he might have had better cardio. And he instead had to go out there and fight Sean Strickland, who has good cardio, solid pace, can go all night. He's used to doing it at a sparring-like pace in the Apex. So he just had a lot of advantages there, and he leveraged it, right? You notice, though, these guys both fought Sean Strickland. They both have something unique in common as well beyond that. Okay. They both fought Sean Strickland above 185. Sean Strickland used to fight at 170 back in the day, guys. Then at 185, Sean Strickland's done well. But his knockouts are at 195 catchweight. Like he went out there and knocked out Brendan Allen at this 195-pound catchweight. And then his teammate, Chris Curtis, did the same thing. And then he fought Chris Curtis again, and it was his most recent fight. And guys, that was a nip-tuck split decision that on the same night, everybody thought he lost, but he got the win. So, hey, hats off to him, right? But then you look at the Jacob Malkoun fight, another controversial decision, another decision where a lot of people were like, I don't know if Brendan Allen really got that win. So on paper right now, Brendan Allen is on the streak of his life. He's a great fighter. He's still in his athletic prime. He's got a lot of things going for him, man. 12-2 in the UFC, like I mentioned. We look at the current win streak, guys, 8-fight win streak. That's just sensational. There's nothing you could say to take away from that. But let's go fight by fight. Chris Curtis was a controversial decision. Paul Berju Craig is basically not panning out as a middleweight, right? Just to put it politely. He hasn't panned out as a middleweight. Bruno Blindado Silva has been on hard times recently. He, has been struggling to win fights. And he did hurt Brendan Allen very badly in that fight. Brendan recovered, rallied, hurt him back, and finished him. Hats off to him. Great win, but the vulnerability is still there. He beats Andre Muniz, out-grapples the grappler. Again, hats off to him. Shows his level. He's one of the best grapplers in this middleweight division, no doubt about it. But then the Jacko fight. Jacko's no longer with the company. It's hard to evaluate that one. Jacob Malkoun. Jacob Malkoun had 7 pro fights at the time, guys. A lot of people thought he won that one. It was a very controversial fight. Okay. Sam Alvey landed some hard shots on Brendan Allen, hurt him. Then Brendan Allen was able to recover, beat him up, and take him away in the second round. Chris Curtis knocked him out in the second round, as a big underdog on short notice. Sean Strickland knocked him out in the second round. He beat Carl Roberson, who's no longer with the promotion, who I believe is no longer a professional. Punahele Soriano, who just got back in the win column at 170 after a little while on a downward trend. And then he beat Kyle Dawkins, Tom Breeze, Kevin Holland, Aaron Jeffrey. I mean, none of these are bad wins, right? Like these are all really solid wins. Losses to Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, Eric Anders, Trevin Giles. Like they're not really bad performances there. He's lost to all really legit guys. But Imavov, I feel, is a legit guy. I do think that Brendan is live for the upset. He's a talented guy. He's very skilled. But the commission's trying to fuck him over by his own account. They're around the same size. If anything, Imavov's slightly larger. He's got the home crowd behind him. He's coming off of a 5-round fight. Now he's coming in to do a 3-rounder, as far as I understand, right? Looking at the topology, I'm 98% sure that it's a 3 by 5 minute fight. Let me just see if I can confirm that somewhere. 185 pounds, pro MMA, co-main event. Yeah, I think we're looking at 3 by 5 minute rounds. So if I'm wrong with that, somebody correct me in the chat, please. But if we're looking at 3 5-minute rounds, I think that Imavov is the more durable fighter. I think he's a little bit more powerful. I think that Allen is the slicker grappler. I think he's a little bit more likely to win this fight via submission. And I think that if the fight goes the distance, it's a close fight, but I'd probably lean towards the hometown guy getting the nod. So for me, I think it's a very competitive fight. I think the line should probably be a little bit closer, but I do lean towards Imavov being the rightly favored individual. I think if this fight was taking place in the U.S., the line would be closer. I'll just put it that way. But I think that if the local crowd is supporting this guy, just like they did against Joaquin Buckley, then even if it gets dicey in round 3, even if he starts slowing down a little bit, he still could go out there and nip-tuck this decision when Allen's had a couple close decisions already in recent memory, including the Chris Curtis fight, his most recent time out. So we saw Nasruddin and Chris Curtis fight, and it was an honest competitive fight up until the accidental clash of heads brought an early conclusion to that contest. So that's my thoughts on the co-main event, guys. I basically lean towards Imavov via KO or decision, but I think Allen is a live underdog. I think his grappling is his best path here, but I think if he elects to trade on the feet like he has been a lot lately, it could get dicey for him. My guy Glinbot says, yep, it's 3x5. Allen wanted 5x5. Imavov didn't. Yeah. So Allen didn't want to fight in France. He has to anyway. He didn't want to fight 3x5. He has to anyway. Like he's just got a couple things working against him. And then he's self-reporting an excuse before the fight, right? Which is like, the commission's trying to fuck me. They're keeping me up all night. They're taking extra blood from me. Like, it's almost like patting the ground before you fall. And maybe he still wins anyway, right? Maybe he responds to that adversity and does great. But I do think when you're the underdog, when you're coming in, with the odds stacked against you, and then there's these other things, these outside forces working against you, it can be tough. And if you remember, guys, Brendan's been on a good streak of putting together these wins, getting the desired result. But there was a long time when the biggest enemy of Brendan Allen was Brendan Allen, right? He's out there, throwing punches at Sean Strickland and starting to mouth off to him and talk to him a little bit. And then Sean Strickland turns up the volume and lands almost 100 significant strikes on him in 7 minutes and puts him away, right? Then he's fighting Chris Curtis and he's landing a little bit. He's doing well in round 1. And he starts talking to Sean Strickland outside the cage. He starts having a conversation. Then he gets cleaned up and finished by Brendan. So I just think that by Chris, right? By Chris Curtis. So I think you look at Brendan and he's definitely gotten more mature. He's gotten a little bit smarter over time. But then you see the Marvin Vittori video at the casino and you're like, but did he get that much, did he get that much more mature? Or is he still the same guy? Does he still have some of these boneheaded tendencies in him at times? And I think he's a great fighter. I think that Brendan Allen, his opportunistic submissions should be studied if you want to be an MMA fighter. If you go back and watch, like if you want to watch a great, fun 5-round grappling match, go watch him and Fluffy Hernandez in the LFA. It's a sensational fight. I think that, what's his name? Dana White made fun of this guy one time. Oh, God, I got to look it up now. It was Pat Miletich, I'm pretty sure. LFA commentator. Pat Miletich used to do LFA, right? Pat, let me just look it up. Pat Miletich. Yes, okay. Pat used to be the commentator on LFA, okay? Guys, if you go back and listen to it, I have to pull this from X now because it's too good not to get right. So Liam picks fights, and then it is Miletich. Let's see if I can find this. If I can't find it in 30 seconds, I will give up. But I thought it was so funny, man. It was basically it was talking about how Brendan Allen and this guy, they're on the ground like hookers and all that. It was the most outlandish line I've ever heard in MMA commentary, but essentially it was just a crazy scramble fest. So if you guys love grappling like I do, then make sure you check it out. And if I can't find it right now on the air. So go make sure that you follow me on Twitter at LiamPicksFights. I will reshare that. It was so funny. Just some comment about hookers from Pat Miletich during the middle of a cage fight. That was hilarious. But in any case, guys, we can move along to the main event. This is the one you have all been waiting for, I am sure. And this is the one I did the most research on today. I respect Renato Moicano. I think very highly of him, right? His jiu-jitsu is fantastic, sensational. But I also think you go through his career and there's been some flaws, I think, that the UFC has identified that have brought him to this matchup. Now, it's not to say that he can't win, right? In all these matchups, the UFC might have a desired outcome, but they can't make it manifest every time. So they can set up the fights, they can roll out the octagon, and then they have to let it play out and see what happens, right? And you look at the most recent fight on UFC 300 for Renato Moicano, and against a 14-7 Jalen Turner, he was on death's door in the first round. And in that round, by the way, he got a takedown. He got great positions. And Jalen Turner was able to get back to his feet. And in the short time that he was on his feet, he was able to badly hurt Renato Moicano with a left straight. And if you look at that left straight, you know, you're going to say to yourself, man, that's a great punch. Jalen Turner, you know, sensational job. He got busted up against Drew Dober. What did Drew Dober hit him with? The left hand all night. He hit him with a couple right hands as well, but it was the left hand all night. The left hook, the left straight, out of the southpaw stance. So his two most recent fights, guys, he got beat up by southpaws. He beat up Brad Riddell because Brad Riddell is tiny and can't grapple, if we're just going to get to the point, right? He's not a terrible grappler, but he's not a good grappler. You go back and you look. RDA fights out of what stance, folks? Southpaw. What attack does he use? The southpaw double attack. The left straight, right? I got my right hand leading out and my rear left hand straight is coming forward, right? I use my rear left hand and my rear left kick. The southpaw double attack. Classic maneuver, okay? And when you look at that, you say to yourself, okay, I got this guy, Renato Moicano, against RDA. He took it on short notice. So you want to give him a pass and say, like, yo, he took the fight with RDA on short notice. Since that fight went down, I have maintained my opinion that RDA showed him mercy. He said, like, this is my Brazilian brother. This is a nice guy. I'm not going to mercy kill this guy. You know, he tried to finish him with the head kick. And when Moicano wouldn't go away from that, he just said, you know what? I don't have it in me to fucking kill this man inside the octagon. I don't need that on my conscience. So I'm just going to let him off the hook a little bit in round 5. We'll get to the end of this fight and be done with it, right? If you look at that fight, Moicano got beat badly. He got beat up. His face was a mess. He was destroyed. And the head kick nearly sent him into another dimension. RDA is not a great finisher. Not in this later portion of his career, certainly, right? He can hurt people still. He hurt Fiziev, just like I said he was going to. I literally called the intercepting knee that he hurt Fiziev with. But I've said before, this guy RDA is talented, but he's just a little past his prime, right? He's a little bit lesser than. And you look at that Renato Moicano fight, and I know it was on short notice, but Moicano was younger. He's got all these accolades. He's still the bigger, longer guy. He got audited on the feet. He didn't have any success on the mat. And RDA just told him what time it was. So you look at that fight, it was another southpaw dummying him up with the southpaw double attack. So you go back and you say to yourself, okay, he beat Hernandez. Fine win, but it doesn't tell you anything. The Jai Herbert win. Solid win. I mean, to go out there and submit Jai Herbert, that's a good quality win. But the Fiziev loss, he gets brutally knocked out. What was it, guys? What was the culprit? It was a left hand. The left hand, constant refrain. It's not my opinion. It's, you look at the Jalen Turner fight, you look at the Drew Dober fight, you look at the Fiziev fight, okay? Then you go back, the Damir Hadzovic fight. It's one of my favorite ever moments in the UFC. He submits this guy within 44 seconds and then starts yelling at the guy because he wanted to fight more. He's like, I just want to eat. I don't disrespect you. I just wanted to fight. And then Damir Hadzovic looks at him in his eye, in his soul, in dead earnest, and just says, then you shouldn't have submitted me, which is obviously true, right? Like Moicano can control how long the fight goes, and he just finishes the fight instantly and says, I wanted to keep fighting. And the guy just couldn't believe it. He's like, well, me too, but you submitted me. I can't keep fighting you now. You've already ruined it. So absolutely hysterical moment. That one I did tweet out today. So you guys can go back and check that out. Hysterical. But I love Moicano, right? Fun guy, been around forever. But why did he go up to 155, guys? Do you remember? It is because his durability wasn't there at 145. Got knocked out by Chan Sung Jung, the Korean zombie. Was it a long fight? No, it was not. That one was an overhand right. So we'll say, shout out to our Orthodox king. Shout out to our Orthodox king, Chan Sung Jung. The only one who could knock him out with the right hand, right? Jose Aldo. I can't remember which side it was, in fairness, but I believe it was the left. Hook to the body. And absolutely sends this guy spiraling around the cage, okay? So now what do we know? We know he can be hurt to the body. We saw that with Jose Aldo Jr. We also saw that with Jalen Turner. Jalen Turner, the fight starts, he kicks him in the body. Moicano reacts poorly and goes for a takedown. File that away. So we say to ourselves, okay, he can be hurt to the body. The southpaw double attack troubles him. He doesn't have a great time reading it. He gets hit with the body kick sometimes. He gets hit with the head kick sometimes, like we saw against RDA. Okay? He gets hit with the left straights constantly. We've seen that against a number of opponents. Sometimes it hurts him. Sometimes it knocks him down. Sometimes it puts him out. Then you have Benoit Saint-Denis. He strikes out of a southpaw stance. He likes to utilize the southpaw double attack. He likes to work behind that left straight. He likes to work behind that booming left open side body kick. So he brings that open side body kick to Bonfim's side over and over and over again. The fight was over before it got started. All in round one, he's just dumping these huge kicks to the body, unobstructed. Bang, bang, thwack, thwack, heavy shots. And when you look at this guy, Saint-Denis, he's not afraid to throw them over and over, not afraid to mix them up. And here's the thing. You see correct application. So when Bonfim was putting up a high guard and saying, like, come on, hit me again, he said, okay, you put up a high guard and I will hit you again right to your body. Then he's fighting Matt Frevola. Frevola goes for a takedown. There's a scramble that ensues. They get back up to the feet. And what ended up happening, guys? Do you remember this? He gets back up. Matt is trying to recenter himself. He's trying to get his feet underneath him, right? And what do you see Matt do? He tries to scurry away along the outside of the octagon. He tries to skirt his feet. And Benoit Saint-Denis angles off and kicks where his head will be. And Matt Frevola runs straight into a left high kick that he never saw coming. That sequence looks so similar to RDA kicking Moicano in the head. You should go back and rewatch them, juxtapose the two side by side. So I think you look at how these two guys approach the fight. And for me, it's very clear. If you're on the Benoit Saint-Denis side, you do not want to grapple with Moicano. Wrestling? Okay, I see the argument for that. Because if you wrestle with Moicano, you can make him fatigued. We saw Drew Dober get on top of Renato Moicano. We saw him hit a lateral drop and throw Moicano on his head. So Moicano is not a perfect wrestler by any means. And in my humble opinion, he is an excellent top player and he is a fine bottom player. So if you put him on bottom, he's not a 0. He's a black belt. He's a very talented guy. He's very knowledgeable. But he's a much better top player. On top, though, he's still not 100% lights out. He did great against Jalen Turner in round 2. In round 1, he lost the position. Against Drew Dober, he did great for a lot of the fight, especially when Drew got tired late. But Drew was also getting back up to his feet a few times. Drew was like trying to attempt subs from the bottom. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So you just see Moicano is very good, but he can be submitted. We've seen that happen before, right? One of these guys has been submitted. His name is not Benoit Saint-Denis. Keep that in mind, okay? The other thing is, Renato Moicano has submitted very good, very quality players in the UFC. So if you look, Cub Swanson is a serious grappler. Jai Herbert, credible grappler. Alexander Hernandez, credible grappler. Riddell, that one's kind of a gimme, I'll be fair. Damir Hadzovic is kind of a gimme, I'll be fair. Bonfim, he submitted back in the day. That's a pretty solid win. But overall, you just look, and there's not like one single submission that blows your hair back. Like, this is the one that changes the game. Like, this is the one. His first ever, guys, career win by knockout was that most recent performance against Jalen Turner, where he got the TKO from the top mount. And so he's shown a little bit of development, a wisdom to his game. If you can get the top position, I've said it a million times, if you're in a dominant enough position to submit somebody, it's dominant enough to get the TKO. Wrap up a gift wrap, put it behind their head, punch them 50 times, let the referee intervene, right? And Moicano did just that. He said Jalen's going to get tired. His coach basically told him, if you can get one more takedown, you win the fight. So I see this as Moicano has a chance to be opportunistic with his submission, right? Try and get a choke, try and get the guillotine, try and get a rear naked choke. I don't think you're going to armbar fucking Benoit. I just don't believe it, right? Like, I don't think he's giving up. I think he'd rather let the arm snap a little bit and then keep going. Like, he's that kind of character, right? I think when you look at Moicano's ability to get this fight to the ground, I do think he has a chance of getting takedowns. Matt Frevola did it, right? So it's possible. We talked about him before. Fly Miranda did it. So it's possible, right? You can take down Saint-Denis. Saint-Denis has a good guard game. He has an ability to sweep. I don't think he's going to sweep Moicano at a high rate, but I don't think he's going to be static underneath him either. He got taken down by Frevola twice. The first time he hit a beautiful sweep to top position. The second time he said, F this, and he just wrestled up to a leg and then cleared out of the position. I kind of think that he could get caught by a guillotine from Moicano. That's like the worst case scenario because Dustin Poirier laid out a blueprint, right? Benoit Saint-Denis, when he gets hurt, likes to grab a hold of people. He likes to shoot takedowns because most of the time, people can't stop him. He's too physical. He's too strong. He's too motivated, right? He's going to keep running through it. We saw him dominate Thiago Moises, who is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, who's a very talented grappler, who's a very good wrestler. And he did it way faster than Islam Makhachev, by the way. But you look and you say to yourself, okay, Renato Moicano, if he's able to get BSD down, is probably the best top player that BSD has fought, right? Like Dustin Poirier is probably in the top 5. You know, Easy Dos Santos is in the top 5. Moises, Matt Frevola, they're in the top 5. Like Gabriel Miranda, maybe like rounds at the top 5. It's like that's kind of where it's at in terms of the guys that he's fought. You look at Moicano, he was very, very close to beating Brian Ortega. Right, he ended up getting submitted at the wire, but he has quality wins over Jeremy Stevens, Calvin Kattar, and the Calvin Kattar fight, he dominated with his striking, right? His low kicks, his footwork. He just used more clever tact than Calvin Kattar and won a very important fight for him at the time at 145 pounds. Now at 35 years of age, I do think he's slower. I do think he is less durable. He's getting hurt in every fight. I mentioned he got hurt against Turner. He got hurt against Dober. He got hurt against RDA. And he got buzzed, I think, against Alexander Hernandez. I'd have to go back and watch. But he's been hurt in a lot of his fights. And you just look at the level of activity, it's starting to slow down a little bit. There was a time when he was fighting with an insane amount of activity. He comes into the UFC in 2014, fights in 2016, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21, 21, 22, 22. He's fighting 2-3 times a year. And now this is going to be his third fight in 2024. He's trying to get active again. He's trying to get money again, right? He's doing the podcast. He's doing all this stuff. But going from fighting a Jalen Turner, who doesn't have very good cardio, right, to fighting a Drew Dober, who made a huge mistake in round 3 of a fight where it looked like he was on his way to winning. He goes for a lat drop for the second time, flat backs himself, and ends up stuck in bottom position to lose the fight. It was a tough look for Drew Dober because it was really within reach. Meanwhile, this guy, Benoit Saint-Denis, in my opinion, he's got good cardio. He wasn't able to show that against Dustin Poirier. I believe in the staff. I believe that because I bet against Benoit Saint-Denis his first UFC fight. He fought Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Zaleski is a great fighter who, if you're a hardcore fan, you know exactly who he is. If you're a casual fan, you might not even have ever heard of him. But I'm telling you guys, this guy knocked out Sean Strickland with a spinning head kick, right? He's a very good fighter. And if you look, Easy Dose put a beating on Benoit Saint-Denis, and Saint-Denis did not quit. The referee should have intervened and stopped it for his own good because they're supposed to be about health and fighter safety. But what we saw there is a man who has a soldier-like will to get victory. And it didn't work out that night. But he started to make a comeback in round 3 after being on death's door and a totally like lack of stoppage when it should have been. So this guy, Benoit Saint-Denis, in my view, is a tough, gritty son of a gun. He went out on his shield against Dustin Poirier. He did everything I said he was going to do against Dustin Poirier. I said he will take him down. I said he will dominate him with the top position. I said he will take his back. I said he will go for the subs. I said he will probably try and get a face crank on Dustin Poirier right over his face like Michael Chandler did. He did all those things, and Poirier surprised me by staying in it, staying disciplined, showing the best poise and patience of his career. No, Khabib, I can't get this guy off me. It was calm and collected in the corner, Gilly Goose Gang laughing with his corner. And he did a lot of things to make Benoit tired by going for the guillotines, by forcing Benoit into this high-pressure fight, by hitting him to the body, by stinging him with those shots. I don't think Moicano has the same power. I don't think that Moicano is as assertive as Poirier in the clinch, right? With those big body shots, with those big knees, with the huge punches off the break. And so I think a guy like Moicano is skilled. He's capable of winning this fight, but I think he's a little bit past his sell-by date in terms of age. He's a bit of a tweener in terms of weight class. I think at 155, there are guys that are a little bit too big and too strong and hit too hard for him. I do think that he's got a unique build and a lot of skills, but he's a lifelong martial artist. He's 35 years of age. He's had a ton of fights. He's been stopped with strikes 3 times. And here's the one detail I haven't given that I think is important. These guys have an inverse relationship in terms of their knockdown ratio in the UFC. What do I mean by that? We will go to UFC stats and show you guys so you could see it for yourself. And it's not just me telling it to you. You guys can see the data, okay? Benoit Saint-Denis was knocked down by Dustin Poirier in his most recent contest. But if you look prior to that, he knocked down Matt Frevola. He knocked down Gabriel Miranda 3 times, okay? So his knockdown rate in the UFC is 4-1. 4 knockdowns recorded for and 1 against. And the one he conceded was to Dustin Poirier, who's tied for the all-time knockout leader in the UFC's lightweight division. So I'll give him a pass for that. Then you go ahead and look at Renato Moicano, okay? He was dropped by Jalen Turner. He was dropped by Rafael Dos Anjos. He was dropped by Rafael Fiziev. He was dropped by Chan Sung Jung. His only knockdown in his entire UFC career was in 2018 against Cub Swanson. He knocked him down, okay? That is a 1-to-4 knockdown ratio. So these guys have inverse knockdown ratios. Benoit Saint-Denis is recording 4 knockdowns for every 1 he absorbs in his UFC tenure. The opposite is true of Moicano. He's recording just 1 for every 4 he received in the UFC. And as you get older, your ability to take the damage gets worse. As you get older, a lot of the damage starts to accrue over time. And I think Moicano has a lot of scar tissue. We saw that in the Dober fight. He was marked up. He was butchered in that fight, even though he won it, even though there was only a number of exchanges where they weren't in control positions. Moicano forced it to be a grappling match a lot of the time, and he still lost some situations. He still lost some positions in that fight to Drew Dober, who's a BJJ brown belt, who's not known for his grappling upside in mixed martial arts, just to call a spade a spade. And I think that the durability is a huge gap here. I think that when you look at Benoit Saint-Denis, the cardio is an unknown. Most of his fights finish in the first 2 rounds. If you look at his UFC stats page, we're going to go ahead and do the matchup preview. The average fight time for both these guys is less than 10 minutes, right? So under 2 rounds. And for Benoit Saint-Denis, we're looking at just 7 minutes, 12 seconds. So that's very, very short. However, I mentioned the fact that cardio is the number one thing that will keep you in a fight when you're getting your ass whooped. And Benoit Saint-Denis got his ass whooped by Easy Dos Santos and was able to stick in the fight for the full 15 minutes and start to come back in round 3. So that tells me his cardio is solid. I think that the cardio of Moicano is hit and miss. When he didn't have to cut any weight against RDA, his cardio looked pretty good for a guy who's drinking beer and eating steak and all that stuff. But also, I think cutting weight has a negative effect on him. I think we saw that at 145 in terms of the durability, but at 155, these other guys rehydrate to be bigger than he is. And you see that Benoit Saint-Denis, 73 inches, same height, right? So height parity. He's got a slight reach advantage. He's the much younger fighter, and he's fighting out of a stance that has given a ton of problems to Renato Moicano. Moicano has just struggled throughout his career against southpaw opponents in terms of getting hurt, getting dropped, getting hit with big shots to the body, to the head, and all of them are hurting him. So for me, I think Moicano used to be a more durable fighter, and I think it's declined over time. And I think at this stage of the game, he'd need a very special performance to beat BSD. It's not impossible, but I think to make Benoit Saint-Denis give up in France will be a very difficult task. And I think that Benoit Saint-Denis does have real skills. He is a talented grappler in his own right. He is a strong wrestler. He's very physical. I don't think it'll be easy for Moicano to body him on the mat. And then on the feet, I think that the left high kick is a huge weapon for BSD here. I think we've got to be watching out for that technique. I think we got to watch for that left body kick to the open side. I think we got to watch his left straight as well. And I think those are going to be the big tools for BSD in this fight. I think they're going to land. I think they're going to have huge impact. I guess a club and sub is possible for BSD. I think it would not be wise to engage in the grappling when both men are sober. I think that's Moicano's best chance at victory. I think Moicano, if this fight plays out on the feet, his best chance at victory is to use evasive footwork, try and low kick Benoit Saint-Denis, try and put shots on his body, try and tire him out, and try and drag him down later in the fight. But I just have a feeling Benoit Saint-Denis too early in the fight. I think Moicano will not have a chance to get off the starting blocks. In some regards, I think he might come out and have a competitive round one with the wrestling, but I feel like he's going to get tired faster, believe it or not, from the strength and the pace of exchanges. I think that Benoit Saint-Denis' ability to do damage to Moicano will also sap his energy and tire him out. So I like Benoit Saint-Denis, and I think he's going to finish Renato Moicano in the first 3 rounds here more often than not. I do think anything is possible here in terms of the method of victory, but more often than not, I think you're looking at early rounds knockout for Benoit Saint-Denis. I think it'll come with that left high kick, but I think he's got the tools to win this fight. You know, the other thing I'll mention is if you remember that left high kick from RDA, the situation ends with RDA in turtle landing a bunch of hard ground and pound. And I think that if Benoit Saint-Denis is in that same position, that's exactly where he TKO'd Thiago Moises. He's a monster from there. He's very assertive from there. He's very strong. He gets that, ride around the waist, and he just doesn't let people get back to their feet. So I want to say one last time, thank you to everybody who's rocking with us, guys. We got 464 people rocking with us live, 108 of you reporting to us live from YouTube. I want to ask you guys, if you don't mind, drop a like on this video, get subscribed to the channel, hit that bell for notifications if you want to know each and every time that we go live. I am thinking about going live tomorrow during the fights. I've been doing some commentary for Dana White Contender Series. I've been doing some, betting thoughts and analysis pre-fight on the channel as well. If you guys like that kind of live content, if it's something you're interested in, then please go ahead and comment below this video and let me know if it's something you'd like to see. The numbers have been a little hit and miss for those shows, and I understand. I haven't put out a lot of promo. I haven't, let you guys know about them in advance. But now I'm asking for opinion. If you guys think it's something you'd enjoy, if you think it's oversaturated and it's not something you'd be interested in, I'm really appreciative of that feedback as well, because I just want to know what kind of content is worth, producing, right? If it's me putting in a lot of time, effort, and energy on fight day and people don't care, then I'm not going to expend the energy. But if people are fired up about it and people want to see more of that content, then I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to try and make that happen with Contender Series for every week till the end of the season. But also I'm going to try and make it so we have, opportunities to do that for as many UFC events as possible. Shout out to our chat, right? If you guys are here and you're new, I want to say welcome to you to the sharpest chat in the game. Thank you all for being here. A sip of the coffee in your honor. God bless you guys. And what we will say is more collabs are coming in the future, no matter what. Cornhusk says more JB, more Pierce collabs. My guy Gordo as well, Plays and Fades YouTube channel. He's been killing it with me on Contender Series for literally years, guys. So I hope that you guys have been enjoying the content. We've been hot and heavy between Contender Series action as well as our, research for the UFC on a week-to-week basis. And we're just trying to keep the ball rolling in the right direction. I feel like the last 2 or 3 weeks, our reads on Contender Series have been dialed in, but our UFC has just been ho-hum, right? It's been so-so. I think I made $5 on the last UFC event, which was a slap in my own face, right? So the goal this week, let's take a step forward. Let's take a step in the right direction. Let's do well at UFC Paris, Lord willing. So everybody keep me in your prayers. I'm going to keep you guys in my prayers. I appreciate you guys for the support, everybody for watching. If you don't mind, go ahead and drop that comment below, whether you're interested in the live commentary during the fights or if that's something that you just don't have the bandwidth for. And then from there, guys, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, there's a ton of information down in the description box below if you're looking for more information from me at any point. I want to show you guys as well before we get going. One last thing to show you guys here, and I will make this available in the chat as well for the people that have stuck it out with us till the bitter end. So I appreciate you guys that rocked with us till the very end. And here's what I'm going to show you guys, right? So this is my navigation document. It's got the main card preview, the previous performance and odds range. What does that mean? I'll show you guys, okay? So the previous performance and odds range, you might say to yourself, how has Benoit Saint-Denis done as a favorite? Well, he's a favorite this weekend, right? So that's his odds range this weekend, is how has he done before in this odds range? As a favorite, he's 4-1 for a 19% ROI in the UFC. Moicano, on the other hand, has been a very profitable dog, 5-2 for a 77% ROI. So every fight on the card, if they've got previous data, we have it listed out. So that's one of the documents that I put together on a week-to-week basis, okay? Another one of the documents that I put together on a week-to-week basis, the social media A-side report, okay? Who's the A-side in every matchup? Who's got more followers? Who do people care about? Who's doing numbers? Who's going to do business for the UFC? These are things I try and think about. Not everybody cares. I try and nerd out. I try and think no stone left unturned. Like my guy MMA Adam Martin used to say, that's something that really stuck with me. And that's something I believe in. If I could find advantages in the marketing, hell, I'll try and find any advantage that I possibly can. And then again, we go back. This is our navigation document. Every fighter on the card, if I have their fight tape, right? I've taped a lot of these fighters. I've written down notes on their individual matchups. We can go through and look, right? Here's Benoit Saint-Denis and some of the notes that I had written about him pre-UFC, right? When he was fighting in Brave, when he was fighting Paweł Kiliek and submitting these guys, when he was fighting out a Bulgarian top team. So whatever information, whatever resources that I have on a fighter, I will make them available on a week-to-week basis. And there's some fighters that you'll notice I don't have a fight tape document for them. But what I do have is years and years and years of write-ups that I've done, okay? So I've done these write-ups like UFC Paris last time they were there, right? And then you can go through, and one thing I always encourage you guys to do, check my work, right? Tell me and say like, hey, Liam, I noticed you get, Gomis wrong every time he fights. So fuck your opinion on that fight. Fair play to you, right? I'm not hiding anything. All my previous write-ups, you could see them. All my notes on these fighters, you get access to them. So it's not about my picks and my bets, right? That is something that I put out because I believe in transparency. But the value add of my information, I believe, goes far beyond my picks. There are people that use my information that don't care what I'm playing. They play their own strategy. They play their own style, but they use the information to their advantage. And that's what I encourage people to do. If you ever are in the Patreon, ask questions, use the information to your advantage, please listen to other people, seek out other advice, do your own research. But what I will always do is tell you how I feel, tell you my best information, the best way I see it, and try my best. That's all I can do. And I hope that you all do the same. Thank you guys for the support. If you don't mind, drop that like as you get out of here. Hit subscribe if you're not already. Hit the bell for notifications if you never want to miss a live stream. And come back next time because we're having all the same fun again. God bless you all. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll talk very soon. See you, folks.